Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session. Today is November 11th, 2024. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. We have a couple items on our work session agenda. Today we have APCHA interviews, entrance to Aspen polling project update, and City of Aspen Employee Housing Strategic Plan and Employee Housing Stipend Pilot Program that we're going to be reviewing. And we'll go ahead and take care of our first item, which is the interviews. And we have got two folks interviewing for one open seat. And we have Joseph Mason and Scott Woolley. Is Scott with us? Scott, come on up. How are you doing tonight?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman.
Thank you. We have not, I don't think we've had a response from Joseph? Oh, come on up. Yeah, we're family. I'd like to start off all of the interviews that we have for boards and commissions, first of all, by thanking you for applying. And secondly, I want to make sure that you understand the meeting dates, roles, and responsibilities for the APCHA board, and that you have no conflict in making those meetings.
I have no conflict.
No conflict?
And then I'll start with just a couple questions, and I'm sure we all have a few for you. Scott, I'll start with you. Can you just describe to me what your interest is in the APCHA board? Why are you applying with us?
Absolutely. I'm a born and raised Aspen local, one of the few who's still around. Hi, Sam. I'm actually a product of the APCHA housing program. My mom has been an educator in the Valley for more than 30 years. And, you know, I saw a single mom raising two kids as go through the education program and end up being an educator in this valley, and brought her value here. And I'd like to also bring some of my skills and experience to bear to help out this community.
And is there an angle of APCHA that you're most interested in? You know, and there's a lot of conversations at APCHA right now doing studies based on affordability rates and rental rates, other things that we were looking at maybe getting some improvement on, which would be allowing people to mature in the program and not hit those cap rates that can limit income. But is there one specific area of APCHA that you're interested in participating in?
I'd say that there are two. The first one would be engagement. I believe that a public engagement program to gain more trust and reciprocal benefit from the community would benefit both the program and the community as people who are lucky enough to be part of it, as well as energy efficiency. I have specific experience in my background working with housing stock that experiences a split incentive and whose quality continues to degrade due to that split incentive. And I'd love to be part of making our investment in low-income and affordable housing as beneficial as possible to the city and the county.
Thank you. Do you prefer Dr., Joe, or Joseph?
Any of the above is fine.
Dr.
Joe will do.
I like it. Same questions for you. Why are you here applying for the APCHA board, and is there an area of specific interest that you have for the APCHA board?
So applying, I don't know, almost seems kind of crazy to step to this program. It's very far-reaching. I'm a PhD economist. I've spent my career in housing finance, from working as a senior financial economist at the Treasury to the Federal Reserve and the FDIC, then an academic career as a financial economist. I've always dealt with housing issues. I think I know what they are. It'll be very interesting to see how the rubber meets the road. I understand we have before us not just a program that requires strategic direction, but also what I find interesting is the day-to-day operation, which in a way might seem kind of boring, but it's really where things get done and where you see incentives and can potentially maybe have a chance to move them around. But it's a very valuable program for the Valley. It's got a 50-year legacy to it. It's a very valuable program to the country, to be honest, because it is one of the longest running affordable housing programs in the nation.
Thank you for that. Where I'm going to start down with you, could?
Thank you both for applying, showing an interest to engagement in the APCHA program, which I think is really an important program for the whole community. I'm curious, Joe, if I may,
Sure.
what piqued your interest for APCHA? I mean, I saw in your application you became aware of it because of your wife, but your interest and your experience is really national and even international. And what piqued your interest in focusing in on the APCHA program?
Well, it is national, international, but there's also a component to it that hits closer to the heart. I mean, I have a family here, a 12-year-old in Aspen School. She rides at a Cozy Point. You know, we've raised her here, and we have roots in this community. But more so, we've supported children's charities and family charities through our lives. As soon as we've got any money to commit, that's kind of where we go. We're big supporters of the Buddy Program. I was talking about it before I moved here. I lived in Philadelphia. There I was on the board of an organization called the Methodist Home for Children. And what we did is we would take in single mothers, single women, often mothers with children, and we'd give you a place to live rent-free as long as you want, as long as you're staying clean and either pursuing an education or looking for a job or working, as long as you want. And it was a great program, a great foundation behind it. We also operated all of the after-school child care for the Philadelphia city schools, which the city itself wouldn't touch. And I can tell you stories about stuff from there. But it was, again, where the rubber meets the road, managing the foundation, attracting the money, and then also dealing with the government grants, which were always tremendously difficult. The state or the federal government offered money to start up a program. You get 3-4 years in, then they cut the money, and you've got the program and responsibility for the individuals involved. It's a very personal program. So it involves the economics, certainly, but you're dealing with real people and real lives in a way that really matters. And everything you just mentioned with regard to the program in your opening remarks, kind of getting rid of what we call in economics the welfare gap, right? If you want to go from affordable housing to free market, how can you do that? There's a big divide in that right now. But we also don't want people to stay in this portion of the housing economy unduly long, shall we say. If you need it, it's there. But if you don't, can we incentivize you to move through the cycle? These are all, again, interesting strategic questions. But then they run up against where the rubber meets the road, taking care of tenants, taking care of maintenance issues of both tenants and owners. Potentially different ways of organizing those, but first dealing with what is and managing through the program.
Do you have specific economics concerns with your work history for 25 plus being in the economics field? Do you have specific concern about APCHA's, any APCHA economics that have piqued your interest? And do you have any ideas, if you have concerns, to programs that might allay those concerns?
Well, we could talk all day about minute areas, but I hope that through my life I can move the needle on something meaningful in this world and leave a little better than when I came in. But just on the issue of maintenance, because I think that has been pretty popular lately to talk about. You can think of the program as really very similar to a private sector shared appreciation mortgage, where the bank takes a stake in the appreciation of the home. I mean, APCHA is owning the housing stock, whether it's rental or owned. So really, both parties have a stake in the maintenance. And I've heard APCHA residents talk about, well, where do I get contractors? How do I find out how to arrange maintenance and repairs? It might be in APCHA's best interest to maintain a stock of such contractors, potentially on contract or even potentially on salary, to respond on a timely basis and be available to grant, so that residents don't have to go out and look for this. You can help them, and then help you by taking better care of the property, which helps everybody's appreciation at the end of the day. So it's just an example of many things. I have no idea if that'll work. I say with all humility, it's a very complex program. There are a lot of diverse interests. So that's an idea off the top of my head, but I remain humble to the real world, absolutely.
Well, that's an idea that's been kicked around for years and years, how we address that. Are you familiar with the rental program and the ownership program, and perhaps the differences between the two?
To some extent, yes. If you start getting into qualifications and cutoffs and things like that, I have to say, I have not studied those.
I'd like to ask Scott to respond to those, a couple of questions. One about any economic concerns about APCHA and anything that allay those concerns, and your familiarity both with rental and ownership programs.
To start with, economic issue that I believe is kind of central to the APCHA program as well as my would be the split incentive. During my time at CU Boulder, I started a program called SCORE, Student and Community Outreach for Renter Efficiency. We discovered that there was basically this waterfall effect that led to the degradation of the housing stock for student renters because of a split incentive. Students don't have incentive to upgrade their property because they don't own it, and the landlords don't have an incentive to upgrade their property because they don't live in it. So what's happening is that these properties degrade over time, and nobody who's a stakeholder, except for the part-time kind of interim occupant, has any incentive. So what I did was brought in Xcel Energy, brought in the city of Boulder, brought in some groups on campus, and got some money together so we could offer low-income energy audits to these students. We connected them with local resources and nonprofits who could help with windows upgrades, furnace and appliance upgrades, things that are a little more than just the tier 1 energy audits that we were performing. But I believe that that's a good kind of example of a similar problem that we're facing here in Aspen. Not only with the energy efficiency of our stock, but also kind of the social credit of the APCHA program itself. I believe that there is a trust issue between the people who are part of the APCHA program on the ground and the people who are operating it at the highest level. And I think that one of the most important things that we could do with that incentive is to build trust so that we have reciprocity in the program. So that people who want to move out of the program feel comfortable approaching the program directors and finding solutions together, limiting threats and improving incentives. So that would be the economic issue that I believe is part of the program. In terms of my understanding of the difference between rental and ownership, yeah, I lived it. I all lived it.
Then a final question for both of you. If you're familiar with the cap reserve studies for the HOAs, that is, there's some gaps and depending on the different, 50 plus HOAs that have properties in the program, the ownership program. And are you familiar with those issues and the studies that are being conducted?
I'll jump in. I am much familiar with that gap and the effect that it has on our local community. I know that from my own personal experience, my mom has experienced 300 to 400% increase in the due that she has to pay for her home. That's really difficult for someone who's on fixed income, and it doesn't feel reciprocal for someone who dedicated 3 decades of their life to the community. I believe that there are conversations that we can have to find solutions that work for everyone. And again, I believe that economics is a huge part of this conversation, but we're in a town that has about 8,000 people and about $200 million budget. Economics is one leg of the stool, and I believe that we need to regain balance in this community by supporting some social and environmental programs that can also help us in our efforts to make one of the best communities in the world.
As far as reserving, it's my understanding in the state of Colorado, condominium associations have the discretion to reserve or not reserve. Again, this is kind of a shared appreciation program, so APCHA deserves a say in that as well. But in the context of reserving, and I have owned condos and owned a townhouse when I started my first the first home I owned. You're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you don't reserve, you're going to pay the bill at some point. It's going to catch up with you. And when it does, and there's deferred maintenance, it could be a pretty ugly estimate. Yeah, but you got to get everybody on board to agree with reserving and give up the short-term gains. Just a tough problem.
Again, thank you both for your willingness to serve and interest in APCHA.
Thank you.
I think Ward asked great questions on.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, just one question then. Are you related to Jubilee?
Yeah, he's my brother. He's my half-brother, but yeah.
Okay, that explains quite a bit. I've known Jed a while. Just want to say again, thanks to both of you. I don't know why, but I'm excited about this because you're both extremely qualified, and I can see where each of you bring different strengths to the board, but I'd like to see both on it, frankly. Looks like you've both been doing your homework and studying what APCHA is really up to and what's going on. I'm really proud of, I'm the alternate on the APCHA board, and it's really complicated. And I'm really proud of the success APCHA has had, and now we're getting into Other communities want to follow what we've done, and now they're probably going to be following what we do about the deferred maintenance issues that we've had. Anyway, thanks both of you for your time, and I look forward to working with at least one of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thanks, apologies for my tardiness. No specific questions. That's what I was going to ask. I just want to express my appreciation for both of you for your interest and say how lucky we are to have people with your experience and intelligence willing to serve. So thank you.
Then I'll follow up with one last question. I noticed in the information that you provided that when you spent your time in Boulder, you were a member of several different committees, advisory committees and the like. And so my question to you is, how do you find that you work in that kind of board scenario, a very collaborative, your vote is equal to other people's votes? How do you work in those kind of situations?
I tend to thrive in this. The reality is that the big barrier ends up coming from external stakeholders and kind of special interests outside of the board. I really do like working with other people who are dedicated to the American democratic experiment. I don't believe that there is a right answer or a silver bullet, especially to a problem as complicated as housing. And I am just old enough to realize that I don't know much. I have lots of experience in lots of different areas. I have a background in energy efficiency, renewable energy. I've been a serial entrepreneur, but I believe that my kind of broad stroke experience, as well as my background in this program specifically, position me well to be able to make good impact on the board, but also to collaborate and listen in a way that isn't likely from a lot of other candidates. Yeah.
Thank you. And Doctor, I was asking you the same, is your experience and how do you operate in a collaborative board setting?
Well, the first thing I've learned through my life is the board is not me. It's not mine to direct. I bring what I can to it. I bring the ideas that I can bring to the board. If the vote, if the will of the board is different than my will, then we move on to the next issue. That's all. But I always commit myself fully, do my homework before showing up to meetings, and try to, as a colleague of mine was fond of saying, try to increase the quality of the debate.
Thank you. Any other last questions, any comments? All right. Well, thank you both for applying. You know, as I always say, it's our volunteer boards and commissions that really add some and make Aspen part of the special place that it is. So thank you so much, and we'll be letting you know as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I believe Joe and I would both be open to the idea of both joining board. That's what the county commissioner said too. That's what's chuckling when you said that.
Our next item on our agenda this evening is the Entrance Aspen Polling Project Update.
Good evening, members of council and mayor. Jen Newton, representing the city manager's office. With me this evening is McGowan, who's a project manager for this project, co-manager with me on this project for the Entrance to Aspen, and Adam Probalski, who's the president of Probalski Research. We're going to go over the survey here in just a second, but just wanted to provide a little bit of background information. The survey is written as about 15 minutes for the respondents to take. And it's important to keep the survey at this length or shorter so that people will be able to take it and not to choose to leave the survey in the middle. The survey we conducted by telephone or an online platform. It's offered in English and Spanish, so when the pollster calls, the call will be initiated in English, and then the caller can switch to Spanish if someone requests it or expresses it in that. For online, the person responding can select Spanish if they prefer. Questions 5 through 16 were intended to provide some insight to the purpose and need in service to a new scope for an environmental impact statement. The purpose and need is one of the most important elements of an EIS. It's the explanation to decision makers, the public, and stakeholders why the proposed project should be implemented, and it's the problem statement. So it defines the problem or the opportunity that the project is intended to address. Tomorrow evening, you'll see a contract amendment related to scoping, but that scoping phase is something that is sometimes called pre-NEPA, and it's used to identify preliminary issues and impacts that are needed to be considered in the process. So that's an opportunity to engage stakeholders, agencies, and the public on the project and gain input. Questions 17 through 22 were intended to provide additional insight to some concerns that have been raised by the community. And then there is a ballot question that's included here that was previously considered by council and written by the city attorney's office. Additionally, there are some questions at the end that are related to possible alignments. So just as a reminder, during the EIS process, all of the possible alternatives, alignments would be considered. So, 40-some or 50-some potentially different alignments. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of the types of alignments that would be considered during an EIS. There have been some community questions regarding the poll. The information gained about the community sentiment can help in the future EIS process and development of the purpose and need. And refinements to these questions tonight can be made, such as clarifying the use of a portion of rule in some of the questions. Traffic light at 7th and May can certainly be added if that's something of interest to include in one of those alignments. And the modified split shot is an attempt to put together several different ideas that have been provided by the community, and that certainly can be tweaked well. So, for example, taking out the bus lane language is something that could happen, to have that be a question about 2 general purpose lanes in either direction, and certainly the cut and cover of that could also be removed. So if there's any of that kind of stuff that you'd like to address, we're happy to do that. I'm going to turn this over to Adam here and let him provide some additional context, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. First, I want to say it's been a pleasure working with Carly and Jen, and we've been working very quickly in the process. A lot of back and forth. We're definitely taking feedback and making sure the survey that's conducted and the results you get are informing your process and helpful to you. So I take any of that feedback and reform the question. My only concern is that we have a very finite amount of time. And normally that wouldn't be a terribly difficult position for us, but you have a small community, and to get the number of responses we need to get is going to take a bit. And so speed for us is pretty important. And what that looks like to us is hopefully having something that we can be in the field with hopefully in the next few days. So with that, if there's, I don't know how we want to handle it. It's your show, so please share feedback, or we can go question by question, or however works best for you all.
Great, thanks. I'll start with a couple, and then I'll turn to other council members if you don't mind. First of all, it's online or telephone. How is that determined?
So in a community like Aspen, everyone will be reached in whatever capacity we have information for them. So in this case, we are talking voters because that's would potentially, those are the people that would be responding and potentially participating in a March ballot question. So it's a finite group of about 5,000 or so folks. And so in the vote file, and then using consumer data to match, we have phone numbers for many, we have emails for many, and so that is, we will initially send emails and text messages, and we'll then follow up with phone calls directly to all those who have not responded, in hopes of achieving 300 completes, and also balancing based upon the voters that you have in the community, based on age and gender and all those other demographics.
Why was it chosen for a telephone poll? Why wouldn't we do an online only or another method here? Why a phone poll?
Sure. So obviously, as you indicated, it's both online and telephone. As you know, probably about 90% or so of what you do with this thing is with your thumbs, not putting it to your ear. So that's the way we communicate today. We experience about 2/3 of Americans responding to surveys that we complete and in general online. That's how we communicate these days. But there are still some among us who have a landline or have a cell phone and much prefer to talk to someone, actually, connect with someone. So our job is to reach your voters in the format that they're comfortable speaking, and we don't want to miss any element of your population. So meeting where they are, both in communication style and in language, is pretty important.
On the online, is there the opportunity for any depiction or pictures?
So the answer is, of course. My only caution with that is people on the telephone wouldn't have that same opportunity, and so we would be concerned about having, looking at the data by online and phone and having some discrepancy between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this, because what we're talking about is kind of a roadway layout here, if you will, and other facets around it, I would think that some pictures and depictions would be most helpful. I've got some comments and some questions around some of the language that is used in the survey that you've presented to us, but I'm going to go ahead and look to other council members for some questions at this time, and then we'll go from there. I saw John, and then Bill, and then Sam.
Yeah, Tori, thanks for bringing up that comment about diagrams, because I think they're super important in order to really get the voters that we're trying to reach a clear picture of what we're talking about. The only other question I had for right now was, did you say we need 5,000 respondents?
No. Our goal is for 300 respondents among 5,000 or so resident or voters.
300?
300, yeah. I mean, if we get 1,000, we'll be great. But just to give you a picture, statewide, we would do a survey. Typical survey statewide is maybe 700 respondents to achieve great accuracy. So that's like 0.0001% of the population. So in Aspen, if we got 300, it is a remarkable percentage that increases our accuracy to an incredible place. That's what your typical poll is, 300 or so.
This isn't directed at you, but polling is really tipping now.
If you'll allow me, I know you didn't specifically address it at me, but just to give you a clear picture, there's no such thing as a national poll. That's why we pretend that these national polls we see on TV are relevant, but they're not. We have 50 elections that make up a national survey. So if you look to any local government, the thousands of local governments throughout the country that do polling and survey work, really dead on accurate. We had, I think 5 or 6 tax measures over the course of the November election, and we predicted 100% of them right. So, and all our colleagues, all our polling colleagues would probably have similar 90+% accuracy. So very different on a local and state and county level than what happens at the national level.
Fair. Thanks.
Adam, right?
Yes, please.
Aspen, to talk to us about this. You done any polls in Aspen ever prior?
We've done, the answer is, we've done research statewide. We just work for the Department of Local Affairs. So we have done work in Aspen, not broadly, not throughout the entire community with some respondents, but we've also done work in, Avon and Arvada and Boulder County and Boulder City. So we're pretty familiar with the construct of Colorado in general.
Great. Definitely covered all my questions about online versus telephone that Tori asked. Thank you for that. Questions 1 and 2. I'm going to come back to those when we go through them individually, which I think is a good idea. But starting on question 30, they're sort of like demographic type of questions.
Yeah.
Why are those relevant to this?
So as I said, our job is to match the demographics of your voters because we want to have accurate results. I want to be able to come back here in about a month and give you some data and talk through it, and me and you have confidence that the research we've looked at, the answers we're looking at, are reflective of your voters. So that's the underlying core. Your voter file, the voter file that the Secretary of State collects, is very comprehensive. That has a lot of data points like gender and party and things like that. That is very helpful. It doesn't have these data points. For instance, I don't want to underrepresent Latino population, and we have a sense of that. There's no authority that tells me voters, versus census, but we'll approximate it based on census and what we think the population look like a little bit different. So the goal is to make sure we're not underrepresented or outsized representing a particular population. Ethnicity is one of them. Education's an indicator of what people vote and how they vote, and so I do also want to make sure we're being inclusive of people who don't have a higher education and not oversampling the people that do. We may not need the gender question, but there are some question as to what's really on the voter file. So that's a question we may not need because we already have it. We're in the case, just to be clear, we're talking one-to-one to a voter. When we email or text them or call them, is to actually speak directly to that person. So that's, we have a lot of their underlying information. I don't know where going with this, but just to let you know, we don't have to report on this data if it's some level of discomfort or it doesn't feel good, feel right. We can eliminate those from reporting, but just know, in the background we've gotten it right. But either way is fine with us.
Got it. Yeah, what I was ultimately getting at is this feels long, whether online or certainly by telephone. I mean, if someone called me and asked me to take a 15-minute phone survey unscheduled, the end button's getting hidden immediately. Just not going to happen. So I guess my response would be, I understand and appreciate your reasoning, which is very thoughtful. I don't know how, I'm very suspicious about how accurate the demographic data is that the county has, or the state has, or anyone has. So to try to get a meaningful comparison between what you have and what you collect, I'm not sure really is going to exist in any event. So it's just like, is this something extraneous is ultimately my question. When really all we are about is, are we getting results from voters? That's really our number one concern. So.
Yeah, and my only thought there is, I want to be able to have confidence that the data is reflective, and the point is taken that there may be some ebbs and flows, percentages here and there of any population. I mean, your population largely looks similar, so there's not that much of a concern of missing even a couple percentage points. We like to get it that right, so we're very open to eliminating or limiting any number of questions. This is pretty formulaic, but very relevant to Aspen. So if there's a particular question, like any of them, that you don't think is necessary, we're very open to discussion with staff, what we can eliminate.
Great. And then I think my last point is kind of food for thought as we approach these questions for everyone else at this table is, are we, if we are going to either graphically or by text poll voters on the specific different options contemplated under the last EIS, and then some other that have been modified and tweaked since then, are we jumping the gun? Are we too early? If it's true that we cannot predetermine the outcome of any new EIS process that we're endeavoring to do, then should we be more concerned about what our community's goals are than about the solutions or potential solutions? My gut is telling me this should sort of be at least two different processes. So something to think about as we go through each question individually and get to that section. Thanks.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, no questions. I just wanted to make it easy for everyone, including council, that I am not supportive of polling, especially at this time. With that, I wanted to explain, there's supposed to be two ballot questions on the March election put on by citizens. One's a 60% for use of open space, and the other is a pseudo preferred alternative approval or denial. And that's what I care about. Polling would not teach me anything. It's a grain of salt. If things ended up 50-50, it could mean they were 44.2 one way and 55.8 the other, or vice versa, which could be a wide swing of things. And I just think the people that answer surveys are going to be very biased in the way they go about things, but an actual ballot question will be very determinative of like what the direction this community wants, and polling might be wise after the fact of the ballot initiative. But I am just sitting here steadfast saying I do not think polling is a good use of money and resources at this time, and really would prefer to look at it after the citizen ballots are done in March.
Thank you. Ward?
Yeah, thank you. Higher level questions for me. It occurs to me that online polling is, I mean, we saw some gaming of systems when it came to some policies that were enacted by the city council. And it seems to me as though gaming of or encouragement of a sector of people to influence the outcome by an organized group it seems vulnerable to that. I question also how the verbiage, how the questions were formulated. Was Carly involved? Did you do this by yourself, or how was this language arrived at?
So let me go ahead and take that one. So we have been through several iterations of questions. We gave the direction that we were looking for some values, specifically those questions that I mentioned that are kind of directed to the potential purpose and need. So I'm going to scroll really quickly back up here, and don't look so get sick if you do. I went past it. I went too fast. So this set of questions, or this question on 16, these are the community values, or the kind of the values that were part of the original record of decision, that decision-making process. And so what we were looking at is questions that are above this that are related to each of these areas. So how important is safety? We didn't ask it exactly like that. It's about, how safe do people feel in navigating the roadway, but all of the questions that are kind of above this, so I have some component of being responsive to this, because we will, if we're starting a new EIS, we'll have some component of those community values that are going to be part of an EIS and that are going to help set the tone for what exactly is the purpose and need. And that's kind of why I went through that. What is that purpose and need, and what is it related to that process? Because it's that problem statement. So understanding some community sentiment around these concepts was the direction that we gave. We also wanted to include the polling question that that this body talked about in September. One of the questions, certainly we could ask both, that was created by the city attorney's office, because I think this polling effort came out of that conversation that you had about whether or not to set a question for this November's ballot. So that's why that question is here. There are some other questions that are related to kind of community sentiment. There was back and forth on the language. I would say it's probably a 50-50 of development based on what the polling researchers are telling us that how we want to ask those questions, but also with the frame of what's important to Aspen and the overall conversation about the entrance to Aspen. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I'll just go to the councilor's first point of gaming the system. So there are safeguards involved to make sure that cannot happen. So every email, every text, every phone call is one-to-one, one individual voter. So when we send an email, it's a unique link to that email, to that voter. And if they take that survey and it is done, no one can access it again, only that person. When we send the text, the same thing, and we make a phone call, we identify the person and we start talking to them. So you could have hundreds of thousands of people who are ready to go and looking to take the survey, but only once we contact them can they take it, and then they're done. So, and I'm sure I look through some other safeguards there are as well, but it's very voter specific.
So are these surveys anonymous?
So and we say that up front, it's confidential. We will never reveal anyone's, and that's one of the reasons why we do get people to spend 15 minutes on the phone with us, because they, of all socioeconomics, of all, geographies, because people do know that their answer is confidential and they do want to contribute to the broader conversation.
I think that some of the questions are subjective and undefined. I share some of the concerns Bill alluded to. I see no reason to have a party affiliation as part of a questionnaire. Our city elections are nonpartisan, so I just don't see that. And honestly, there are a couple of questions in here that are like, former mayor used to say, this is shoot the dog, the dog question, shoot the puppy, the dog question, and the warm and fuzzy kind of seemed like a push. But the first sentence of that, if we're going to go through some of these, could be stuck in just how concerned are you with the wildlife. There also seems to me that there's a question that's been asked, or is being asked, has been asked and answered in the past, but I think it perhaps has validity to revisit, because the question and the answer in the past was quite a bit in the past, and a lot of the people that answered that question are no longer here, and there's a whole change in the electorate of Aspen since a lot of these questions were posed, and indeed, are these values that are on the screen now, are they still the values that we want to have? And another question that I had was, we have questions about the community-led, and it was my understanding, or I got this thought, and I might be wrong, that back when CDOT conducted these, all the outreach, there's been extensive outreach over the years, not a lot of outreach recently, but extensive outreach over the years. No, I lost what I was going to say. Let me review these.
If I may, I think the community-based planning concept is probably where that question, and I think it's interesting and important to know that going into this EIS, how important that value is. And there certainly is in the environmental impact statement process an opportunity for stakeholder and other engagement with people. And so, it might not be, do you get to pick the exact solution, but, how important is that you're part of that conversation. And I would say that there's an example from the Glenwood Bridge project that I often use, which is that, and I think Jim from our team at Jacobs has mentioned it before, when they started that process to go through all the alternatives, I think nobody really thought that there was going to be a bridge that swung, and had the interchange that it does for the Grand Avenue Bridge. Well, my understanding is that is something that was an idea that came from the community. So there's an opportunity for there to be strong community input, if not picking, we want this exact solution.
Yeah, so that's where I was leading with that, is that I'd be led to believe that the CDOT doesn't listen as much to what the community wants as to what they feel is the proper alignment or solution. Is there any validity to that? Has there been a change in how CDOT has looked at community-led versus what they see as the best solution?
Well, I think they have to follow the federal process, and so they're weighing all of those things and looking at what has the best fit and what has the least impact. So that's part of why impacts are considered. I think that the community values are part of that conversation, and I know that it looks like Sarah wanted to add something to that.
That's right, exactly, the community values component. So when we say community accessibility on this 16, real key is that I believe perhaps council or individual counselors define community differently than perhaps CDOT does. CDOT will look at the entire valley as a community. And that makes sense, given it's primarily a solution focused on transit of people up and down a corridor, in and out of Aspen as the end of most of that travel. And so that is a critical difference that I often hear in the language used by individual counselors, is there is perhaps disagreement between either individually or collectively with CDOT's definition and perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and specifically to question 10, acceptance, if you look at the results of the ballot questions over the years, white acceptance could be 10 people. So that phrase in there, it can be misleading, because I don't know if we're going to get wide acceptance no matter what. And I think that, Ellie, Adam, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think that you answered my question about where there's a number of references to the Aspen community, and I think what you're saying is the definition of Aspen community is those people that vote in Aspen.
In this case, that's our target, and if there's a better way to characterize that, we're happy to adopt different, more defined language.
Yeah, because we've had Picken County thinks that in other counties think that they should have as much say to the entrance of Aspen as the Aspen voters do, and that's another. I'm not going to go down that wormhole. Thank you. I think there's some questions that are going to go over some of these. Like it's the expense of Aspen's expense, and it should be Aspen's. I mean, the taxpayers that pay to Aspen. It's not like we have $150 million set aside for an entrance to Aspen. And another question that for me was a little bit vague is that the bridge needs to be replaced. And I don't think it needs to be replaced in the current location, or if it needs to be replaced or repaired, and there's just some nebulous or different views on that.
John, did you have some follow-up?
Yeah, I guess that's missing for me in this, and I don't know if this is towards Aspen, but how we would address this, but to take into the account all of the non-voters that have to deal with our entrance to Aspen, and how do we reach out?
So our charge is certainly to inform you broadly, and then we do have, I think, a specific question on, a ballot question, because I think that's a part of this process, not the only reason you're doing this. There are alternatives. We go to the broader resident community. Most of your residents are voters, so we can go to the broader community, anybody that lives in Aspen, and then cross-tabulate the people who are voters and show you those numbers differently. I'm not advocating for anything, but that would give you a smaller portion of the results would be from voters. But if that's a major consideration for you, then that's definitely an option. In fact, I'd kind of like it because there's more people I can talk to.
I have one more question I wanted to ask.
I'll be right back to you. Are you interested in designing a survey that opens it up to that? And the reason I ask that now is because I was going to come back and say, well, first of all, how do we feel about phone interviews? How do we feel about these questions, returning us information that we might find useful or that the community might find useful? And, you know, and how that relates to what you said is that, you know, I was maybe contemplating an online survey that you would enter in your area code, zip code. You know, where are you filling this out from, and that you could get both response from Aspen voters as well as Down Valley participants, and they could be parsoned off. So, you know, that's, if we want to hear from a wider net than this target group, it may be possible.
I just feel that there's a large segment of that we're leaving out of this poll.
Okay, I'll take that as the yes, you would like to hear from them if you could. Ward, you had one other question?
Well, it wasn't so much a question as a thought, is that I think polling, there were questions about what the community wants. And so that's a reason that we want to have polling. And I think that polling's important because it'll help inform the discussion and maybe direction of the conversation going into a March ballot question, which there might be two, but it would help. There might be three. The council could put one on. There could be a couple of citizens initiatives. I think polling would, I think it'll help focus the community, give us some kind of a gauge of where the community stands. And I see the value of it, but I have reservations about how much value I'm going to give the results.
Yeah, understood.
Fair.
Yeah, I was just gonna say with the Valley stuff, it's like all the more reason in my mind to wait ballot questions on the March election. That seems pretty clarifying enough at this point in time. I don't see why we'd go through this polling because so much of this information could be rendered useless come the March election.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And to be quite honest with you, seeing this, I understand more of your point than I did before. The one thing I'll tell you though is about this ballot question that keeps being talked about is that the way that this ballot question is being positioned, or at least the iteration that I've seen, and perhaps another one, is that it doesn't really give you an answer about what people do want. It could only really get you an answer about what people don't want. And so, you know, I'm very hesitant about the weight that you're putting on a ballot question because the kind of direction of the ballot question asks the simple question about would you vote for bus lanes to utilize open space? Well, that could be a yes or a no depending on the scenario that question is, right? If it's perhaps the modified split or the 3-lane that needs some open space, but it's along the existing corridor, somebody might be like, yeah, that's great. But when it comes to open space coming across the heart in the middle of the Merle Thomas space with a cut and cover tunnel, they may be like, no, that I don't want. But that question's not availed to them through a ballot question. And you know, there's the other part of that is that some people may have issue with the preferred alternative of things that they don't like, whether that's the traffic light at 7th and Main, the potential removal of a historic cabin, the cut and cover tunnel. You're not going to find out what people would prefer around that. And the reason I guess that I come back to that is because having been here in the late 90s, when these discussions were going on, and I saw how this preferred alternative evolved. And what I mean by that, I'll give you one example. What I mean by that is that the cut and cover tunnel was a direct effort and a response to the open space that would be needed. And so the solution to that was to return open space via cut and cover tunnel. It was modified, if you will, and again, as the poll even says and illustrates in here, is that the original approvals for the record of decision in 1996 were for a 2-lane parkway and a transit corridor. The later updated 1998 version was the cut and cover tunnel, the traffic light, 7th and Main, et cetera. So anyway, the problem with the ballot questions is they don't get you to what people want. They may just be a vote against what people don't want. And so I have concern there, but I do understand what you're saying about this poll in regards to a ballot question. I get that. So what I need to know is, and I've got one who is like, now is not the time for this poll. I've got one who is like, I got some questions on this poll. Ward has said that he has specific issues with some of the wording and some of the questions that are here. So the first question for us is, do we want to spend our time and see if we can make this into some questions and a methodology that we like and accept, or do we not?
Clarify after.
Sure, go ahead, Sam.
I just want to clarify from your comment that, like, I actually agree with a lot of what you say, but my point is if polling does happen, it should happen after the ballot questions to clarify from what those results produce. But doing it before could just mean you probably got to do another poll afterwards to clarify all the muck that you've created from doing polling now and then getting a ballot question that might be contrary to what the polling says.
Right. Bill and then Ward?
Yeah, I am supportive of going forward with polling. I would like to narrow it to understanding Aspen voters' goals and motivations, not trying to get everyone to participate in the solutions, because I think there's so much complexity here and so much still to be done.
So a more goal and value-based polling.
Yeah.
And there's another good reason for that is because the alternatives that are out there are not just the 3, but there's variations of the 3.
That's right.
So again, narrowing it down through questions is just, okay.
That could be helpful to me. And just to touch on the question that you asked John prior about including those that don't live in Aspen, I don't favor doing that at this point, not because I don't value their opinions, but because we're about to endeavor on spending a bunch of Aspen taxpayer money and our own efforts, I think should be focused on the goals and motivations and desires of Aspen voters at this time, not on those of the broader community.
Thank you. Ward, a couple of different questions in front of you.
I do support having the polling. I think that having the polling before a question, a ballot issue, again, like I said, it will focus attention on it, give people some ideas to think about, some alternatives. And, if we have a ballot, 1, 2 or 3 ballot questions, they're all going to be, I think, focused on the use of Thomas open space, and that's an Aspen issue. It takes the Aspen voters to decide if they want to allow that Merle Thomas, a sliver of that Merle Thomas open space to be used. And it should be well defined what sliver it is, where the corridor is, that it's a modified, all of those things that a polling can help people focus on it, because Tori, you were here in the 90s. I was here. John was here. We remember all of this stuff, and values change, community changes, the community thought changes, but it still comes down to the Aspen voters are going to have to decide if they want the Merle Thomas open space to be used for transportation. So I agree with Bill. It should be focused on Aspen voters.
I appreciate that. And again, I'll use myself as an example because these ballot questions that are being proposed, they put me in that unfortunate position of saying, it's no secret, I've not been the biggest fan of the preferred alternative, and I think there's better alternatives. So I would support some open space, but I don't support the current preferred alternative use of open space, right? So how would the ballot questions get to somebody like me who's like, yes, I do want bus lanes, I do want transit enhancement, and I don't mind using some, but not that plan, right? That's the concern.
Yeah, unless you have a specific alignment that you're gonna vote on, you're not gonna get satisfaction of your concerns. I mean, if you say, only can the Merle open space be used for the preferred alternative, then you've got an answer from the community at election time. But if you say that the Merle Thomas open space can be used for transportation as defined by the community as a preferred alternative as it exists now or as it's modified during the EIS process, then you're leaving flexibility for a preferred alternative, for a split shot, for a modified split shot, anything that would use that property.
Okay. And, you know, for me, that's a non-specific enough ballot question, but this is where, you know, people differ on what questions are ripe to go to the voters and what aren't. All right, if we're gonna keep going with this, the second question that I have for you then, everybody, is the telephone surveys. Are you comfortable with telephone surveys in this? Would you prefer it be online? I personally am really concerned about telephone interview surveys when there's an online opportunity.
I think I'd respond that Adam said that sort of telephone is the means of last resort, not first resort, so I'm fine with it based on on Adam's response.
Okay.
And the indication I got from Adam is that it's not open to anybody, that there's specific emails sent for people to take that survey, so that it's not, as you say, there's safeguards or guardrails against gaming the system. So you know, there's some people that are willing to talk. I'm more along the lines of what Bill said, that call's gonna end if they say, do you have time for a 15-minute survey?
Depends on what the survey's about, though, right?
Depends on what you're doing, more than anything.
That's a good point, too.
More than anything.
I guess my question is, in the online survey, will there be diagrams? I guess that's still unclear to me.
That was just the question I asked. I believe we can make sure that happens.
I like that answer.
So I will just say that have some visuals that for the first three of those alignments that we could provide based on what Jacobs has done. I think that there's some, based on some feedback that I got earlier today, it sounds like there may be a difference of opinion about what that modified split shot looks like. So understanding what that means, or maybe potentially eliminating that question, then I think that's the one area where we don't necessarily have visual. I think it is possible for it to be put together relatively quickly, but without the specifics of that, I hesitate to say that we can turn it around in 2 days, but it's something certainly that we can work on before this goes out.
Great, cool. Okay, yep.
Can I interject? Where is the 2 days thing? Where's this time frame coming from?
So there's really
I'm not so time sensitive here.
Yeah, the direction that we received from council was that the goal for this polling was to happen in advance of the deadline for the March ballot. And the certification deadline is January 10th, based on when the question would need to be set so that that could be tested with the actual ballot. And working back from that, and given that there are some holidays, and that there would be, if there were a desire to set a potential question from council, that would ideally happen at the December 17th meeting. So that you'd be able to direct staff to put something on the ballot by January 7th. So it's just a compressed timeline. So to answer your question, it's not necessarily 2 days, but that's kind of the timeline that's identified here. The longer before we get that out, the less likely that we're able to hit that target.
Thanks for the response and explanation, Jen. I put no weight on that deadline or that goal, so I'd rather get this right personally.
Agreed. I don't think the 2 day is the necessary deadline here. What we've seen change conditions for us in this is that we have ballot questions that are going to be floated. So we are not that concerned as a council anymore about putting our own question on because they're coming up, right? So maybe, so I agree, and if somebody else agrees, we can relax the hurry for 2 days right now. We should get our information back, but to be honest with you, it's getting more unlikely that this council would put our own question on because there's the potential of 2, possibly 3 in this arena already.
Do I hear 4?
You might. All right, with that, let's start. Yep.
Just that, there's that deadline, January 10th, you said?
7th. Yes, 10th, 7th.
January 10th is the certification deadline for the clerk's office. And what is potentially held on your calendars as a special meeting.
And we would, council, is it a ordinance or is it just we approve it one meeting?
It will be done by resolution, given the time frame for certification. And that it is not only if council wishes to place a question, but any citizen petitions also should be referred to the voters also at that January 7th meeting. The reason you don't want to wait until later in that week is that should there be any technical issues with any of those, or should they get rejected for publication, there's time to cure before the January 10th deadline.
Yeah, so just to be clear on my point that I don't feel forced that the 13th, beginning on the 13th for the polling is a hard date for me. As long as we have enough time to be informed for potential ballot issues, that would be formalized on the 10th of January.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, guys, let's go as quickly as we can through the survey that you have in front of you. There have been some questions and concerns around some of the language, so we're going to go through this question by question real quickly. Let's just start. Number 1, right? Obviously, this is to gauge the gravitas of this issue, perhaps. You have the entrance to Aspen or the highway, you have housing, you have so many others. So this is just to gauge if this is the most important thing that's facing Aspen today, I assume?
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's also a chance for us to give the respondents a chance to really engage in the survey and say we care about what you think. And yeah, the results may surprise you, but it's a real chance to understand what's top of mind.
Great. Yep.
My only suggestion, if you all feel like this should be included, is to limit the response length. Otherwise,
yeah,
I fear that you might have someone on the phone with you for 45 minutes and only answer question number 1.
In written format, in the online environment, they can answer as much as they want, and in the phone as well. We don't tend to have, we tend to sometimes have paragraphs, but not hours. And we don't put significant weight on one response. We do put collectively them together to show you a graph of the responses thematically, but we also provide the open ends, and we call that bedtime reading because it's what your residents really care and think about. And what we do is we provide overlay of age and gender, a bunch of different demographics, so you get the experience of life for the people and what they're saying without knowing who they are.
Question number 2, how would you rate overall quality of life in Aspen? Again, this question is to get to how much this issue weighs on your everyday ability to have satisfaction in your community.
It's actually a very broad question. You already have this in the community survey, so I'm comfortable eliminating it if we're going to go along and maybe add or delete. This is a question I'm comfortable eliminating, but I want to make sure staff is comfortable with that.
What Bill
I'd
supports?
propose eliminating it, only because I'm trying to find a way to limit the length of this entire thing, and this one seems obvious.
Okay, others? Are you okay with question 2, or you want it gone? I know. I know.
I don't see the real need for it.
All right, that's enough.
All right.
Cool, question 2 can be gone. Let's get to that paragraph that is below that. I would look for a little editing here. This paragraph doesn't necessarily make all the sense to me. I would eliminate the first sentence and just go to the second sentence. So, you know, there's language in this that is, it's just kind of setting up this next question, but it's, to me, it's a little bit leading. So I would say the Castle Creek Bridge was built in 1961, was designed for a 50-year lifespan. I don't think you need to say this means that it passed the end of its design life. That's kind of obvious. So there's just some language there. Other than that, I think I'm fine through today's volume of traffic and being in fair condition. I think that that's relevant. There is an increased need for repairs and replace the bridge soon. I think that's fair in there because that's kind of why we're at the table talking about this. When it gets to the 98 plan, I would say that that's plenty fine, that it refers to that. In 96, my issue here is that it refers to the 96 Aspen voters approved. And after that sentence, though, there might want to be clarification that in the subsequent vote, the Aspen voters did not approve for the use of the road open space for bus transit, right? So all I'm saying here is that there's a little bit of fluff that could be cut out, and there's one other piece of information that really fills out why we're asking these questions.
Agree with everything you just said. I also in the last sentence, starting with in 1996, I think we should have some more qualification that voters approved limited transportation use or a light rail transportation use plus automobiles, something a little bit more specific about what that approval was, and then a little bit more definition of what the 2 lanes for automobiles and a light rail system actually means. So 1 lane of general traffic in each direction plus a future light rail system, if viable. That kind of, just try in still limiting it to 1 sentence if possible, but some more clarity for people about what that approval was. You know, even people who think they know what that was don't fully know what it was.
Understood. Ward?
Yeah, I, on the 4th line down, that's in, that line, I think that there will be a need to replace the bridge soon. I think it should be made clear that the replacement does not have to be in its current location.
No. The current bridge that is there would ultimately be replaced in its location.
Do we know that for certain? I know that if it's the only entrance, or if it's a split shot, it probably has to be replaced. But if it is a secondary use, the repairs might be adequate, and the CDOT has guaranteed to keep it up to the level of traffic that would be used if it is not part of a split shot or main entrance.
We could say replaced or repaired.
The language that there says it to me, it needs to be replaced or repaired or replaced, and replace the bridge soon says it to me. I don't need the amendment on that line. I get what you're saying, but I think it is clear there, and my understanding was that the preferred alternative, the original was in order to be built, in order to allow the existing Castle Creek to be replaced eventually.
And just to address Bill's comments, I think later on there is a question that is more specific, that if we get to that, about what the voter approval was.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but as an introductory statement, again, without making it long, I think a couple of clarifying points are important.
I think we get what you're saying.
Notes, great, thank you. Question 3, how concerned are you about the safety of Castle Creek Bridge? I know some people would want this in, but I think that is an unnecessary question. I think we are all concerned about the safety of the Castle Creek Bridge. Goes without saying, but
I'm wondering if we should ask it in a different way, perhaps asking what the preference for prioritization is, whether the city of Aspen should prioritize upgrading the condition of the existing bridge or working on a new entrance to Aspen solution.
I think that fleshes out in the other questions that come up that maintain the existing alignment versus making a new alignment.
It's not quite the same question, though, and perhaps I could have phrased it differently, but
No, I mean, I understand what you said. You've said it before. You've advocated for it. There was a group that I think wanted to put a ballot question on about that. Again, a couple of things for me, and I look to other council members. One, we don't own the bridge. Two, CDOT has said that they do everything they can to maintain the usability and the safety of that bridge. So for me, I don't mind leaving it. I don't need it to be any more specific. I'm just saying, like, this is an obvious one to me.
well, I would say if we're gonna leave it, I'd like to clarify what safety means. Are we talking about in terms of vehicle car crashes? Are we talking about structural safety? One or two additional words in there I think are important if we're leaving that question.
Yes, I saw that as a suggestion. And how concerned are you about the structural safety? Is that what you're talking about?
Structural safety, integrity, structural integrity.
Is that what you're looking for in this, guys? Do you support that? Is the question that you want to ask here how people feel about the structural safety of the bridge?
Again, to me, I don't want to overly focus on the current alignment. And I think I think everybody is concerned about the safety of the bridge, whether it's part of the eventual 3-lane shift, a 2-lane, S-curves. Everybody wants it to be safe. I don't know that there's a real need for this question. I think everybody wants it to be safe.
I would agree. I would take this out.
Same.
Okay. Number 4, how concerned are you about the threat of wildfires in Aspen?
I think same logic applies
I
to your
mean,
previous comment.
yeah, I unfortunately, I just feel like, again, this is, I don't know. I don't know why this is in there, but do you want to explain why this is in there? No, not
First of all, I'm comfortable deleting anything and I'll stand up if I think there's something that is important. I think the relative importance of ease of ingress, egress, or in this case, egress, this speaks to that. But if, I'll turn to staff and see if there's any, critical component to this.
For me, I just think that that's an understood and implied, if we're going to be building a second bridge, that is one of the factors of having another bridge.
And we do ask this sort of in a different way, in a different question. So
Okay.
certainly we can take this out.
Okay. Can we drop this one?
Yeah, if we're going to keep it, I'd say egress, wildfire egress to Aspen.
And that is later in another different kind of question, but I agree with you. It's not about the wildfire, it's about the evacuation or yeah. Okay. Moving down, we've got a couple of sentences. Study developed for the following questions. How important to promote the following values. Okay. Question 5 asks about community-led and inclusive. I agree with this question because I think that it is important to find out if our community wants their community voice heard here. So maybe this is an important question to find out where people are on the scale of, like, yeah, do we want a voice in this or not?
My only suggestion would be along the lines of what Sarah mentioned earlier, is whose residents? Is this Aspen voters that we're talking about? Is it Aspen property owners? Is it Pickens County? Is it?
Yeah, you want to clarify all residents.
That'd be my first question if someone asked me this question.
All residents in this context, I believe, is in order to represent from Aspen to perhaps Glenwood.
So then I would say Roaring Fork Valley residents would be my suggested amendment, if that's the agreed, context here.
Yeah, for me, I think that this should be community-led and inclusive, but, you know, again, this is, the question that we are looking to go to the voters with potentially is about the utilization of open space for the rubber-wheeled solution of buses. And so if that's what we're doing, then really the residents that vote on that are Aspen. This is saying, well, you know what? It's not saying, because the sample size of this is just registered voters of Aspen. So this means registered voters.
Yeah, and I think it could be a very informative,
Residents, I mean.
it could be a very informative result to us if the response to this is overwhelmingly unimportant and we change it to say Roaring Fork Valley residents, then that's telling us that our electorate is not interested in what people outside of Aspen have to say on this issue, or vice versa. So I think it's a good question. I think it could be meaningful in terms of the values that we need to consider.
Would you accept just eliminating the word all? Because again, this is a specific target group of respondents?
Yeah, I'd propose replacing all with Roaring Fork Valley.
I'll support
I
that.
agree with that.
But again, this is not going to all Roaring Fork.
No, but that's, the question is asking is, should future efforts on this, the process, AKA EIS,
Okay.
be inclusive
Is
of?
there a desire to differentiate between Aspen residents and Roaring Fork Valley residents?
Is there a desire?
Yeah,
There would be.
so, I mean, we can ask it in that way. You know, who should be included in this process, and say all Roaring Fork Valley residents, just Aspen residents? Yeah, which one is, you know, or it's not important to me.
That's a good suggestion.
I guess what I would suggest is that we word that in a way that doesn't leave people with the impression that we have full say in that, because certainly CDOT has, will open this up and is required to open this up to cooperating agencies, which may reach as far as Glenwood and beyond.
I'll listen to other council members here. For me, I would eliminate the word all and just of residents when addressing the entrance to Aspen.
I prefer Adam's suggestion.
Okay?
I'd like Bill's original suggestion to inclusive of Roaring Fork Valley residents, because that lets us know what registered voters in Aspen think about extending it to all Roaring Fork Valley residents.
I would support that.
Sam, what's your?
So inclusive of Roaring Fork Valley residents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you guys want to hear. That's what we can hear. Let's go to question 6. How important is it to you that traffic congestion is addressed? Is that good?
I like it, but I would, I think it's really important, but I would like it slightly better defined. Like, what does traffic congestion mean?
Traffic congestion and travel times? Would that do it?
I think that helps. Does addressed mean improved? Does that imply that it means improved? That would be my hope, personally.
You know, but again, this is broad survey questions. We're just trying to get some answers. This is not the most important question. And this plays out when we get to, but I understand what you're saying.
For me, it's a very important question, and a very important part of this project is improving traffic flow. I wouldn't do any project that doesn't improve traffic flow personally, so.
Yeah, the expectation, though,
Is, the expectation on this is minimal, right, for this third of a mile? Right?
Improvement can be marginal, but I'm not doing something that's neutral or worse, is my point. I just want something that makes marginal improvement.
Okay, so what do you, traffic congestion and travel times, is that okay? Would that,
And again, yes, I think that's a great suggestion, and how important to you is that traffic congestion and travel times are improved?
thank you.
I mean,
Would be my suggestion.
I think we get the concept. Talk about relief or less congestion. I think we've got an idea there. Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you. Appreciate it.
How important is it to you that transit solutions are considered for the entrance to Aspen?
Again, I think I know what's being asked here, but, you know, what is transit?
Right.
Multimodal in front of transit, I think.
But what's is this public transit? Is this private transit? Is this Uber? Is this bikes? Is this, it's what?
Well, I think I'm sorry.
All the above.
Is there any issue with us referring to RAFTA? RAFTA Transit?
Relationship, Lisa, since you're on the board, I would encourage you to have that conversation with Kurt. I think it's fine for you to say things that are words like public transit, bus, and pedestrian-friendly transit. You can be a little more descriptive in what you mean by the word transit in here without referring to another agency.
Okay. Can we get some language included there then? And I respect multimodal, but I think that it should be more specific. So I like including public transit, maybe comma, bus, and other modes, multimodal, bike and pedestrian perhaps, something like that.
And then, you know, my other point on here would be, again, considered. What does considered mean?
Improved.
Improved, prioritized, on equal stature to general traffic. I don't know what we're asking, so.
Got it?
I think CDOT has a preference towards multimodal or mass transit.
I would say it's not a preference, it's a mandate.
Let's hope.
So is that true? There's a codified statewide mandate that they prioritize?
So there are some greenhouse gas reductions that are helping to some regulations related to that that are part of CDOT's kind of new consideration, and certainly transit, use of transit is one of those. And you've seen the prioritization of transit in a lot of the dollars that are happening related to CDOT, but certainly I would say that it is a mandate. There is a priority for transit to be part of a project. It's certainly with dollars.
Question, Jen. So is it incentivized with dollars, or is it mandated by code saying that?
So we can go back and ask CDOT that specific question. We can tell you definitely it's incentivized by dollars, but I recall a requirement that they must replace at minimum what exists today, which includes a multimodal transportation system that we have today.
Okay, I'm fine with that, but I think the value that I'm trying to understand from our community today is, should we be prioritizing public transit? Should we be keeping public transit on equal footing to general traffic, or should we be prioritizing general traffic? That's where I'm trying to be educated.
Okay.
Maybe that should be the question.
Yeah, maybe it's a multiple choice question, is you know, what's your priority?
Thank you. Okay, Ward?
Yeah, that would work. I think multimodal would, I mean, with the CDOT priority or mandate, that multimodal or mass transit be part of the solution, but you can ask a question multiple choice.
Great, thanks, Jen.
We got some direction.
I don't think I would
Okay.
give support to anything that did not prioritize getting people out of their cars.
Well, I appreciate that word. I'm trying to understand the community at large's value on
I
this one.
understand.
Okay, they've got direction on that. Let's go to number 8. How important is it to you that the city ensures that motorists can safely navigate the roadway in the solution for the entrance to Aspen? I'm not really sure what this means.
So I think the question that really was being answered in the record of decision was about vehicle crashes. I think I had vehicle crashes in here, and I think we took it out. We can certainly put it back in.
How important is it to you that the city ensures that motorists can avoid vehicle crashes?
That's not exactly what we had before, but it was more specific to addressing traffic accidents and roadway issues as it was considered in the original record of decision.
I think
I'd counter saying that
minimize accidents.
there's gotta be statewide or federal design standards for something like this today that we gotta meet at a minimum, so,
It seems
this
superfluous.
seems like exactly, it's an extraneous question.
I don't think I need question 8,
I think everybody wants it to be safe.
especially what's, going on. Number 9, how important is to you that there's a commitment to the environment, protecting wildlife? Obviously, this is important or unimportant, so any modifications here, or is this plain enough? Good enough?
Yeah.
10, how important is it to you any relative alternative selected for the entrance to Aspen has wide acceptance from the Aspen community?
Ward touched on this one already, it's, what are we asking? What does wide acceptance mean? And why does it matter, ultimately?
This one is not confusing to me. This one is plain, that's exactly what we're doing up here is we're trying to get to something that has wide acceptance. And for me, wide acceptance is anything beyond 5149 when we go to the voters, which is what we saw the last time. So
So does that mean 2/3? Should we write supermajority or 2/3
I would just strike
majority?
wide, just acceptance.
majority acceptance would be okay by me.
Majority is 51, which you just said you wanted to avoid.
Well, I'm just, this is a question for other people. I don't know if that's even important to them at all. So
Yeah,
I'm
we
not
might
gonna set my
not
threshold.
even get 51, it might be 50.4%.
Anyway, so I understand this one. Scratch the word wide, add majority, greater acceptance. I don't know. What do you guys want? Let's keep going.
Majority works for me.
Okay. Let's just leave it at majority then. How important is the cost of potential alternative when addressing the entrance to Aspen? Understood?
Scroll up, Jen, or Carly, whoever's driving the computer.
Oh, sorry,
Thanks.
I keep forgetting.
How important is cost? I mean, that's a tough question because we don't know how this thing's gonna come together, but I get the question. It's just placing dollar values on this. Let's move to question 12. What if you knew that the entrance to Aspen Bridge would cost approximately $150 million would be paid for by the city?
There's just not enough context on this question for me. Which entrance to Aspen Bridge?
Right.
Are we talking about a bridge in situ of the existing?
You just generalize it to the solution, the chosen solution or something like
Correct.
that.
Yeah, I think you're right. The question is supposed to get at the fact of whether the taxpayers are concerned about implications to budget and services, et cetera.
And you did have, I can't remember who brought it up, but somebody mentioned taxpayers, so we could say paid for by the city's taxpayers, if that would clarify for, I can't remember if it was your question, Bill.
Ward said that.
Ward.
Yeah, I think it only has to be paid for by city taxpayers if it's not the preferred alternative or a preferred alternative as defined and modified through further EIS and NEPA process. So if it's not that solution, then the city's in for the hook for the 150 million. So I don't know how, I guess it would be part of an educational discussion during a run-up to a ballot question, but that's the underlying implication to me. It's the only time the city is gonna have to pay $150 million city taxpayers is if we choose an alternative that CDOT doesn't.
We can
I would-
say exactly that.
So I think we had the converse question here as the starting point. But even if there is a preferred alternative, there's certainly an expectation that there will be some community dollars in that project. So that's why we ask it this way rather than if it were paid for entirely by CDOT, because there would likely be other dollars that are a part of that.
Yeah, but not 150 million.
So we can say some would be the responsibility?
And we can take it out too. I mean, there's a question about cost that's already in here.
And now I'm rereading the question. I don't understand how those responses are relevant to the question.
It's important.
No, it says, what if you knew the answer?
I know, no,
We would change the.
The
Well, no,
responses don't match the question.
So they do, the goal is to see if there's a difference between the uninformed question about cost and the informed question about cost, to see if there's a difference, but open to other suggestions.
Oh, well, then I would say, how, then you sort of have to restate question 11 after you say question 12.
Right, this is like a part 2.
No, it's probably part 2.
How important is the cost? And then
I
the
get
second
it.
part
Okay, if you
is,
read them, if you're taking them together. I
let's
got it.
see,
But online, if they're coming up one at a time, I would say it has to be very clear that 12 is asking you to reconsider your answer to 11.
Okay, we'll make it clear, but yeah, it's just a follow-on, okay.
Would it be acceptable for the council if, in here, if we added language along the lines that said, with limited or no state or federal funding assistance? Would that capture the essence of what you're trying to get at here?
I think so.
Yeah, that avoids the question about a preferred alternative. That
Well, you're asking the question if we somehow want to de-evolutionize and take this whole section of roadway as municipal roadway, and it comes with this giant price tag, is that acceptable? I mean, I think that's the question you're trying to figure out how to ask here.
right.
And then the only other suggestion I'd make on this is instead of would, I would say could.
I would take this question out, but I've heard good input from you guys, so if you have input about how to restructure that question a little bit, we'll leave it in.
We've got it.
All right. How important is it to you for cleaner air through the alternatives?
I would argue that this is redundant to number 9, and also I don't even, how are you measuring that? What does it mean? I think number 9 addresses it adequately.
I'll agree
Well,
with that.
the reason is that this one comes from the federal criteria where the Clean Air Act requirements are part of this, and I think will still be part of this.
That's fine, but expecting the average person to understand what makes up those criteria of the Clean Air Act or
Yeah,
some
and
reason.
no, I agree with you in the sense that, because there will be Clean Air Act requirements, I don't know that this is a necessary question. Others?
Yeah, if we have to meet these qualifications or standards anyway, why ask the question?
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Bill's, it's covered under question 9 for me.
Alrighty. Moving to 14, how important is it to entrance to Aspen alternatives ensure redundant ways for residents to leave the city in times of emergency?
I'm okay with it, I would just say in the down valley direction would be the only qualifier I would put on it, because it's obviously not doing anything for us in the other direction.
It says leave the city, so that's one direction, not to come into the city. I'm fine with leaving it. The language is ensuring redundant ways is a very eloquent way of saying, do you want a second bridge or not for emergency egress?
Would multiple be a better adjective?
For me, it would.
And should it say by vehicle?
Thank you.
Yeah, let's just have transporter pods.
So we'll leave it in, but it may be a little bit cleaner language. important is it that it fits the character of the community and is aesthetically acceptable to the public? That's fine with me. I would love it to reflect community character
Leave it.
and be good looking. 16, okay, out of the list of the values, this one says, please select your top 2. I would be interested in extrapolating that more. I'd like to know, I think there's 10 here. I'd love to know top 5 even.
Ranked choice voting.
So one way we do this is we say select all, and there's a cascading chart that shows up, because people should choose, let's say everybody chooses 1, you'll see that at the very top, and then it'll kind of come down to a very finite group of people choosing one of them, so.
That'd be great. If you
Yeah,
could rank
select
more
all.
than 2, that'd be wonderful. If you're saying you'd like to do them all, or you
Yeah,
have
nobody
the
chooses all.
capability to do them all, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
My request here would be for some parentheses next to each one, explaining to the general public what they mean.
We'll take the text from staff on that, or work with them to develop it.
Yeah, if it's doable, that's, some of them are a little bit amorphous to people that may not be in the process.
So to clarify, we'll do that. We will, though, use the 1996 Record of Decision as the basis of what those words mean, because that is where this list is from.
Agree. Thanks.
Okay, let's move on. We want to know your opinion about the planned bridge replacement alignment through, the word planned is the one that sticks with me.
Proposed?
Yes, all those are better than planned.
Proposed.
Using your thesaurus. Proposed is great for me. And that brings us to 17. So these are questions that are regarding the Merle open space alignment, construction traffic. How concerned are you about increased traffic and congestion during construction?
Can I make a sort of broad suggestion that, and I very much value what you said earlier, Tori, about the answer might be different depending on whether there's a taking of open space on the border or straight through the center. But I think I'd be interested in just a broad question going like, is it appropriate to use city open space to implement a solution like this, or something along those lines? I haven't really contemplated my words perfectly on it, but how do you feel about utilizing some, and maybe it's a multiple choice question. It depends, could be one of the answers. Yes, no, could Merle open space be used?
Oh, are you talking about 18? I'm sorry, are we talking about 17?
Kind of, maybe it's a new question.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Before all of these,
Yeah.
it's more, again, I'm more interested in like the broad values than I am about specific stuff, so.
Yeah, and I'd love to entertain a question like that, because that does get to the heart of this whole kind of discussion about, a new alignment or not, and the possibilities. So
is it something like, and again, this needs a little bit of work and wordsmithing, but, are you willing to consider an entrance to Aspen solution that utilizes Merle Thomas open space for new vehicular transportation? And it could be yes, no, it depends. I'm spitballing here.
Yeah, and I see the differentiation for me is that the least amount, or is that not a concern, right? Are people like, is that a concern? Are people like, no, you can use it, use whatever you need, or are they like, yeah, use it, but let's do it wisely or in the most minimum impact, that kind of thing? Adam, you were just shaking your head like you want to kind of understand the aim there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then back to question 17. How concerned are you about increased traffic and congestion during construction? I would say we kind of leave that one alone. Let people chime in on that. Then 18,
Shoot the puppy.
dogs. Rural open spaces become, how concerned are you that these residents might be impacted? Okay, well, you've got dogs, then you got wildlife, then you got the trails. So it separates them out, like, you're gonna ask, are you a dog lover or not? And then you go down to general wildlife, and then beyond that, you go to trail users who may not have dogs. Okay?
I think I'm fine about this. The word residents in 18 is weird to me. It should probably be users.
Yeah, I would agree with users, but I would also just strike this. I don't know why. I don't know why you're singling out dog owners.
Right, this could, the other suggestion is maybe this is all combined, 18, 19, and 20 are all combined into kind of one question. Like Meralt is used for a variety of different things, including
For dogs.
dog
wildlife.
walking, wildlife,
users.
trail users, paraglider landings,
Community
and
garden.
more, community
Community
garden,
gardens.
historic buildings and museum. The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
You know, how concerned are you about the impacts to these uses once a new entrance to Aspen? I don't know, bridge is, I don't think it should be limited to the word bridge, but a new entrance to Aspen solution is implemented.
Yeah, I would omit 18. I would strike the first sentence of 19. And 20, I would put with cut and cover wildlife, bicycle, pedestrian crossing. Those are what I had in my notes.
So is that, I think we got two different things. We had combine all three?
yeah, well,
Or-
I think, maybe just move the council members, move the dog owners and their pets, into the trail question 20. So we don't need 18, but dogs as another user could be in the trail user. The wildlife is separate, and it may be something that we'd want to identify right? Are people concerned about the wildlife impacts, or are they concerned about the user impacts? So I would leave those two separate, but I could see 18 being in 20.
Fair enough.
I'll agree with that.
Okay.
Which is lovely because that takes us all the way down to 21. How concerned are you about the financial impacts to the city of Aspen? I thought we asked that earlier.
I think so too.
So no 21?
Yeah, and my notes on 21 were, if the preferred alternative is not chosen, the financial impact to the city of Aspen tax-paying residents will be impacted.
Huh? Huh?
Well, the financial impact to the city of Aspen is huge if it's not I'm not saying the current preferred alternative, but an alternative that CDOT has determined. If that's not chosen, then the city's in the hook for all of it.
I don't think that's a necessary conclusion.
I think we get there with question 12.
I think the refinements we made to the earlier question, I think capture what we're talking about, so
Great.
we can go
Okay.
ahead and get rid of this one.
Great. 22, current inspection, rating falls below. How concerned are you about CDOT moving the process forward with addressing without input or approval by the Aspen voters? I think that asks that question well.
My,
Sorry, go ahead. Warren.
I just, my question was 50.3, was that post-2024 inspection, or was that before that?
That's the 2022 inspection, and we can clarify. And if we somehow get results in the next 2 days, we can maybe amend this question. So rather than recently, we'll just give the date.
I'd like to suggest that we change the language instead of on the second line, can implement. CDOT believes it can implement, though the City of Aspen attorney has consistently argued that a vote of Aspen citizens is required.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I would discourage us, though, from putting words in CDOT's mouth without their approval, and then they're going to want to review the entire survey instrument. That's certainly a step we can take if you'd like, if you don't mind the delay. I would think that is a question that actually has to be answered by the Attorney General's office rather than CDOT as well. And so we have also asked for the official answer, which needs to come from that source instead of the CDOT staff, just for some clarity there.
Well,
I'd say maybe able to.
my intent is, I think, important here is we're making a statement that's contrary to what has been said at this table many, many times, so.
I'm sorry, Bill, were you gonna replace can with may, or?
Yeah, I would say, that's what I was gonna say, is can with could.
Or maybe able to?
Maybe, I'd be okay with may be able to, I suppose.
Yeah. Yes, I think the rest of the question summarizes it well.
And the only additional note I had on that was entrance to Aspen without additional input or approval by city voters. Because we've had a lot of outreach and approval, but this is saying that, can we go forward without additional, I think.
Understood. That's fine. Additional.
So now as we come to 23, I'd like to revisit my question that I posed to all of you before is, do you think it's premature to get into this level of detail in this polling? I mean, again, I'm much more interested in the goals, values, and motivations of our electorate than I am about what everyone's comments on the past solutions are.
I agree with you there on this. I agree. I would like to see this be more goal and value survey oriented. I don't know that, I think that this is just premature because I don't think that the community has the information that we're trying to share with them. So yes, I don't, I would not put this in our, I wouldn't put it in here with this language. I definitely had a simpler vision of this survey about asking people what their preferences are and their goals and their values and which solutions they feel reflect those goals and values. That's kind of where I was coming at it from on this.
If others are in agreement, I'd propose we get rid of 23 through 28. I acknowledge how much work went into creating these questions, so thank you, but it's not what I'm interested in right now.
This instrument is to inform you, so whatever you want to have data from.
Yeah, this, Bill, with respect, I think this doesn't lock in any of those decisions, but it gives us an indication of how the community feels about it. So I think it would have value, and with the understanding that it's certainly not locking in any of the options that are suggested here.
I don't know about breaking out 24, 25, 26, and 27. Those four, but then leaving in 28. 28 is ranked choicing these opportunities, just these opportunities. I think this is.
With graphics? Okay, without graphics? No way.
I agree. I also have, and then we'll find out from other council members how they want to do this, but I would support eliminating 24, 25, 26, but maintaining 28. However, in 28, there are a couple issues that I have with some of these. And so, for example, the split shots as they are described here, they still maintain the cut and cover tunnel and this, that, and the other. I think that 28 leaves them in equally general, but if we have depictions, that they can be explained through those depictions. I will tell you that we received an email today from a proponent of the split shot who was saying that what he's been advocating for is a modified split shot. And so that the split shot, which still maintains the Merle open space, coming across the Merle open space disturbance, the cut and cover tunnel, probably not the traffic light. The traffic light probably wouldn't be necessary in that split. Anyway, my point being is that we've talked about this briefly this afternoon, that what we're talking about is a modified split shot that does its best to come around the Merle open space. That's kind of the thing about the split shot. So I think this needs work, but let's just start with this. Is there council support for not doing 24, 25, 26, 27, but maintaining 28?
Yes.
And I'd like to get a pulse of the community. I don't know how we're gonna decide on this if we don't get some kind of a indication for the community what they support. You know, if you look at the map that shows the easement that's been approved, I mean, it's, I don't know that all you guys have that, and I'll be happy to forward it to you, but it's, the alignment is pretty much along some diagrams I've seen of a modified split shot, that it's just it uses just a sliver of the Merle open space as the easement that has been granted to CDOT.
Yeah, I think this is the issue, is that explaining that to somebody and explaining these four different, in each of these questions, and I respect what you're saying, Ward, is that yes, we do want to hear people's kind of opinion about this. Again, this is early opinion. There's a lot of work. Hopefully what we're going to see is a lot of next step work with EIS NEPA process to go through these. But this is just a survey to get that initial reaction. So, John, what was your take on 24 through 27 and utilizing 28, or do you want to spend time going through 24, 25, 26, and 27 to make sure that the language in there is what we want?
I think your suggestion of doing the Crescent 28 with ranked voting does eliminate the need for the other questions, but I really think diagrams are gonna be important.
Mandatory.
Yeah, they should be mandatory. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions about the modified split shot if we're trying to get to a diagram? One of the questions around the split shot, this modified split shot, is whether or not it includes a transit lane, whether in that configuration it's 2 general purpose lanes in and 2 general purpose lanes out.
Two general transit,
General purpose lanes, so
General purpose,
general traffic
one
lanes.
in and one out,
Okay,
and 2 dedicated bus lanes, one in and one out.
okay.
I think if we're gonna retain 28, that you have to define what those options are. So 28 could be one long question that defines what the modified split shot is, what the 3-lane shifted is, what the modified direct is.
Yes,
Well, I think
that's
with
what we're
graphics
proposing.
does
yes.
that better than anything else. So that's why I'm so insistent, and it sounds like others agree with me. You've got to have graphics with labels that show what it is. I mean, 5 paragraphs of this is too confusing. I think, here's the picture. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is the meat of what we're trying to get to right here, to be quite honest. And I think that there's an elegant way to do it with depictions, and full descriptors.
Yeah, you can't,
Full descriptors. Yeah. All right.
And you know where I stand on this, but should the quote-unquote preferred alternative be one of the options here? Is that what modified direct is supposed to be, or is that?
Yeah, that's what it's called in the EIS, is the modified direct, originally before they called it the preferred alternative.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. All right. So let's do that. Then let's put those 24, 25, 26, 27 into the one question of 28 and make sure that there's adequate descriptors and depictions of each. '29 is that open-ended narrative for people to say,
Sorry, Tori, can I interrupt?
yep,
We didn't really address 23. It's a question contemplated for the November ballot that we did not end up putting forth. I suggested also getting rid of this one.
yeah, I'm sorry, I thought that was included. I'm sorry.
Everyone's okay, can the majority are okay, we can read 23 as well?
I am.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Once again, 29 just says, hey, open-ended, tell us more, what do you want to say? And then we get into some of the demographic questions. Did anybody care to, I think I heard a suggestion of removing Republican and Democrat polling.
So those after, if you see on page 8, after thank you for your time, those are just items. So after question 32, if you go down a little bit, those are all collected from the voter file. So we have that data. I think if there's some comfort level or discomfort with reporting that, we don't have to necessarily report it, but we'll match demographics internally to make sure the results you have is matched. And the same thing goes if there's some level of discomfort for 30 through 32, we will appropriately apportion it, but we could not present it if that's a preferred method.
Yeah, this is important information to reach statistical significance in your findings. So even if you do not wish to see that data, this gentleman needs this data in order to protect the integrity of the work of himself and his company.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Sarah. I don't have, I don't have much input on these questions. So, others, you all right with leaving them so that we can verify our statistical?
Trust but verify.
Yes.
Exactly. And you don't have to decide on, when we talk to staff, they can tell us at that point in the report to present it or not to, in the final version.
Awesome.
All right, that's all we had. Thank you very much for all of your hard work.
No, thank you. Yeah. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Mind if I use the restroom quick?
I don't mind. Please do. Anybody else need a little bio break? Go for it.
Slice of pepperoni pizza would be good.
Soon. Soon. We're just gonna wait 1 second. Okay, we're gonna wait for the.
Show you if I have it.
My name is just listening to turn around. Like, our number one fan.
I'll leave this on.
Hey, Ward, isn't his mom, does his mom live in Hunter Creek in a 3-bedroom?
Yeah,
Alone?
forever,
Yeah.
yeah, 30 years. He's fluent Chinese.
Kind of a bummer. Yeah, I got that through his resume.
Yeah.
Chime in if there's something we should add, sure.
All right, we are on to our third and last item of the agenda this evening. We are talking employees, housing, and the like.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Alyssa Farrell, Administrative Services Director, and I have with me
Keith Strucker, Finance Director.
And Liz Axberg, Housing Policy Analyst.
and we're here to talk about the City of Aspen's housing plan.
You okay if we share screen?
Please do.
Thank you.
So to kick us off, we wanted to give you a level agenda of what we'll be discussing this evening. First and foremost, the Employee Housing Program overview, including options, our housing inventory, some data that's encompassed within the inventory, and then going into our housing strategic plan that's actually been under development for almost a couple of years now. And then internal and external housing data, and lastly, the housing stipend as part of our benefits package. So here's a snapshot of our housing program overview. We have a sort of a small menu of options currently for our employees at the City of Aspen. We have an inventory of 74 units. We have a limited down payment assistance program, which is a $30,000 loan with a 15-year maximum payback, and the interest rate's tied to the 10-year treasury. It's only for APCHA and city deed restricted units currently. That's something that we've discussed within our housing plan as well, is broadening and opening up that down payment assistance program. By keeping it within APCHA and the city deed restricted units, that decreases liability for the city. So that is all encompassing. We also have a rental loan assistance program for first, last, and security deposit up to 50%, and then 12-month payback terms for employees. Yes?
Alyssa, could you explain what you mean by decreases liability to the city on the down payment assistance program by opening it up?
Feel free to jump in. So if someone forecloses on a unit, it's much easier for us, for the city, in terms of returning that unit to the city or retaining profits that may be harder to obtain if it's an APCHA or a city deed restricted unit. Thank you.
It's the order of liens. We have more authority in that process when it's a unit that is controlled by the city or APCHA through a deed restriction, traditional free market unit that has the potential to have additional liens placed on it by the deed holder throughout their ownership period that the city may not be aware of.
Thank you.
Within the down payment assistance program, I just want to mention we have around 6 active employees, 11 since the inception of the program that have been part of or participated in the down payment assistance program. This briefly goes into the city's mission and vision statements as it relates to our housing plan. So really the purpose of the program is there's a high degree of focus on delivering essential and emergency services to the community. And it speaks to our values of being a leader and preserving the Aspen community. On this slide, I first and foremost wanted to take a step back and add a little more context in terms of how we develop these goals. So again, as I stated, this is almost 2 years in the making. We had key internal stakeholders from around 20 departments, including but not limited to police, utilities, legal, city manager's office, finance, asset, et cetera. We really came to the table and developed an internal strategic housing plan, and that was included in your packet. In addition to the internal key stakeholders, we've gathered and shared with other municipalities, similar large employers, information to develop the strategic housing plan. We're all trying to crack the same nut as it relates to the benefits in housing. These conversations have been helpful in developing the city's housing plan. Our goal has been to make it sustainable and comprehensive, as you'll see here in some of our planning goals. We're also focused on communication and transparency. We've stated that there are 74 units for emergency workers. And having those conversations when that's around 20 to 25% of our workforce, we're improving transparency and talking about that eligibility criteria within the program and helping our employees understand the program. In addition, we're talking about a flexible and responsive. Housing is very dynamic, and that's part of our planning goals and how we develop the action plan within the strategic housing plan. This slide is very informative. I know there's a lot going on here. This slide really provides context on the right around how we got here.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. With turnover at around 14% and a healthy target's probably 10%, and really expanding the time to fill positions. Survey data, exit interview data, all our cultural organizational listening sessions, all leads to the city to needing more housing tools, more housing options. And the housing stipend, which we'll discuss shortly, is the most broad-reaching option, and it is an additional tool for the toolbox. And you can see that's in bold on our action plan as a higher priority. That being said, we recognize that continuing to increase inventory also remains an important tool as well, and we've discussed that with council previously. While 100% is not the goal, it is a goal to house a large percentage of our emergency workers, to serve the community, and the overall goal is intentionally fluid and continuously evaluated through a thoughtful approach while balancing other housing tools that may kind of continue to grow and expand. And then tonight, we're focused on the housing stipend benefit, which is truly the most broad-reaching and potentially cost-effective option from an FTE, full-time employee impact perspective, which will then inform other areas of the action plan.
Bill?
Alyssa, you mentioned you'd like to be at 14% for turnover. Do we have any comps for that? Other local large employer? Sure. Sorry about that. Do we have any comps for that? Other large employers, Picken County, et cetera?
We use Employers Council survey data for that, along with other governmental survey data. So we've targeted 10%, and currently it's at 14%, and that's been our current benchmark.
So the Employers Council data set is, I don't know, probably for that data set has 200 employers, maybe?
Give or take, and that does include Colorado data, municipalities, regional, Western Slope, Front Range. It's the gamut. Thank you.
But does that include public and private sector?
That is, we primarily public sector data for that, so it's most relevant and Colorado specific.
And I think Bill's question was targeting whether this is, excuse me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but was targeting whether this is across the board for public and private.
Well, the question is it a reasonable goal? Is 10% a reasonable goal for a large employer in this specific environment? And I'm curious to know that. I'm sure ACRA has or could get us some data on this. Obviously, that's primarily private sector. There's some difference, but it's not totally different. And I think that informs this whole housing action plan to a certain degree. So I think it'd be very helpful information to have.
We can certainly see what there is. I think the key part, what I can tell you is at 14%, I see service disruption for our community. And that's what I care about more than the comparables.
Well, I understand that, but that may be 14% may be unavoidable, or you may be doing very well. I have no idea. There's a lot of reasons why turnover is high and probably will always be high in a community like Aspen. Do we need to adjust our business practices to make sure that we aren't impacted, service levels aren't impacted, understanding that it's always going to be that way, even if you continue to house people? You may not be solving that issue with buying a bunch of housing units or building a bunch of housing units.
Councilmember Guth, there is a trend analysis too, so looking back years prior to see, is 14% last year, it was 17%, so is the trend analysis going down? So 10% is a target based on Employers Council data, but you're looking at other variables as well, and service delivery is a component of that too. Time to fill positions, so how long is it taking for recruitment and retention? That is significant, and that has continued to increase. For certain positions, it can take 6 months to a year, so you're talking about impacting services for that extended period of time. Those are other variables along with vacancy reports and rates too. We have exit interview survey that really correlates to housing, why employees are leaving. So you have turnover data, but you're digging deeper to really understand and determine how housing is impacting our employees. We did a survey in 2022 that talked about biggest issue with our employees, and it's everywhere, right? In terms of housing and the needs for housing, trying to drill down into really what would best match our employees' needs. And at the end of the day, it's a menu.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate all those answers, and I think it's all very interesting. I'd really like to know how we're doing relative to others in these regards. And this is a bigger question than just related to this housing action plan, but I do think it informs this housing action plan. You know, what if Glenwood Springs and Rifle and other municipalities have the same numbers? Then it's not just about our cost of housing.
Sure, we'll gather more information.
Just add to the conversation, say probably a little bit more than a decade ago, I started with the city. I think we were floating around 7 to 8%. Since COVID, that we kind of really saw that shoot up. We had a lot of job openings per single job applicant. I think there were 2 jobs for every 1 worker at one point in time. That's come down a bit, but I do think that we are substantially higher than we were a decade ago.
Totally appreciate that. Question is, are others experiencing that exact same thing?
And we can look into that.
Understood.
Thanks.
All right, this slide really talks about our housing inventory, and your main takeaway or highlights are inventory units, so you have the full information here, and recent acquisitions of purchasing and building. So you'll see 7 units within our recent acquisitions. It's giving you a comprehensive overview of our inventory. And on this slide, it's housing utilization. You can see the largest number of units are for emergency workers within utilities and the police departments. These numbers ebb and flow ever so slightly. They're usually consistent with utilities and police and your emergency workers always, I should say, being housed in the majority of our units. If there are 4 vacant units, 2 are held for recruitment currently within our legal department and the planning director position. The rest are currently posted citywide, and we are accepting applications as we speak. And then I also wanted to highlight the non-city employees section you'll see there, and that's really where you have, for example, an IGA with the animal shelter, and there's back and forth in terms of the IGA with who has priority for the units. So an animal shelter employee would have top priority as an example, and then it rotates between Pitkin County and city.
Excuse me, Alyssa, can I go back a slide or so? For the acquisitions and for our 505 fund in general, our occupancy requirements that APCHA has, are they applicable to 505 housing as well?
In terms of filling the units with the number of?
Yes.
Yes, to the extent, yes, for the majority of situations.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little bit of an art more than a science. So for example, there might be a director level recruitment that we're holding a 2-bedroom for, not knowing the family size. Perhaps they don't need a 2-bedroom, however, there is not a suitable 1-bedroom open at the time of hire. So we need to give them the 2-bedroom. It's just the ebbs and flow of the inventory that we have to take into consideration in those situations. The current employees all do apply through APCHA, and we do get some category recommendations from APCHA, both with and without retirement assets. So to be transparent, we treat retirement assets differently than APCHA because no one can retire in these units. And so therefore, they really should be growing those retirement assets to prepare for when they are not associated with the City of Aspen employment, to make their transition out of this housing.
And to elaborate even further, you have circumstances where you're housing multiple city staff, staff who may be married, as an example, in some of our city housing units.
And one more question on the currently vacant. How long have they been vacant? And how long do you hold vacants for critical recruitments, and how many positions fall into this definition? I'm trying to get a full occupancy, leaving some room for having something available for critical recruitment, but how many are vacant waiting for a possible higher level hire?
It varies. It may change where we have one unit and then it may transition to another unit that we're holding. So I don't have specifics in terms of how long a unit has been vacant for today, and I can follow up with that. Know that it does ebb and flow.
And then a question directed to Sarah, that in a scenario where an applicant might wind up in a 2-bedroom where she only qualifies for a 1, once they get that housing, they're locked in, they don't have to move into a smaller unit if one becomes available?
It depends if they're on rent or purchase, about what rights the city may or may not have. So we have always the option to non-renew a lease. Generally, we only do that with a substantial reason why not to renew. It's usually about lack of care of the unit or separation of employment. So generally speaking, we don't force someone to move yet again after they've already made a move up here into the city or the UGB. What I would say is that often we see those people who have that happen definitely have brought in other workforce to our community and have considered that in their housing choices. The other piece, lastly, that I would add to that is that when we reach that point in a recruitment, we may, based upon vacancies, actually have 3 units. Remember, during a hiring process, we can't ask what your needs are for housing. It's not a permissible piece in the process. You have to actually offer the employment before that conversation occurs to comply with hiring practices. So sometimes when we get to that point, we're able to have a conversation about, really, is this unit the right unit for you? Perhaps it's more important for you to be in town and walkable, for example, and therefore you're willing to make a trade to a studio to allow that happen instead of a different size 1-bedroom unit. So we negotiate that once we get that stage with new hires. If it's someone within the employment of the city already, and it's a vacant unit, they must apply in a way in which fills the unit. So, for example, we have situations where a police officer may apply for a 2-bedroom unit and says, and hey, I'm going to take a roommate with me who's a non-essential worker for the city to fill the other bedroom. But the eligibility will always remain with that essential worker for the unit.
And so is 4 a target number that you keep vacant?
I prefer, to not have any. In this particular case, the 2 vacant units that have been advertised for lottery, one of them just went through some renovation work, so it was offline a little bit longer before it was put out. The other one, the person just left the unit on the 31st of October and left it in good standing, so we're flipping it and already have it out for occupancy. Nice. With the goal of it being done by December 1.
Thank you.
Thanks for the utilization info.
All right, great. So now I'm going to be walking us through some data, both external and internal, that has just been informing our policy outlining and development, and give you an idea of the conditions of the housing market that employees experience. And this first slide, these numbers aren't going to be too unfamiliar with any of you. And it's just, here's our median bedroom rents, and this was published by West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition's 2023 rental study. So that was in October 2023. And then the median home price, as shown below, is more current. That's from the Aspen Board of Realtors, just from this last October. And so, you can see here, affordability is really tough in our valley, and it's across the valley. And on top of that, vacancy rates are pretty low, and so availability is also tough here. And on top of each other, vacancy plus affordable, that's even more difficult for renters, especially and home buyers. And I mean, it does get more affordable, as you can see, as you move towards Glenwood, but you're still looking at a median one-bedroom rent of $1,500 in Glenwood as well. Great, and then now actually looking at affordability for City of Aspen employees given these conditions. You can see here, so we have the one-bedroom median rent. So we're kind of just using one employee, one bedroom as the example here. And then we have the hourly rate equivalent, and then actually the needed hourly wage if you were gonna be putting 30% of your monthly income towards rent. And that number doesn't include things like utilities that are commonly also used in affordability when you're running affordability numbers. And so that's why below you can see we put afford in quotations too, because that can be a loaded term. But so you can see what an employee needs to make to afford median rent in each of these communities. And then below we're looking at the hourly wages of City of Aspen employees by the number that make those wages, and then given this 30% standard, what they can make. So you can see more and more get grouped in as we move down Valley, and in some ways, so that's pushing our lower earners farther away and farther down the transit corridor as well. Great, so now where do our employees actually live? We have a heat map here that shows where employees' addresses are. And you can see it goes from Aspen all the way to Parachute. And just looking at the numbers here, the 167 in Aspen, we looked and almost all of those employees live in subsidized housing that live in Aspen. The majority of them do. And then along with this, I mean, about and that's 114 total employees live in APCHA city housing as well, just for you to know from that number. And looking at this as well with the numbers on the left, about half of our employees commute from outside of Aspen, and then almost a third are commuting from Carbondale or farther, and that's around an hour plus of a commute.
This is great information. Does anything like this exist from previous years? Like, is there anything to measure?
No, I'm not sure whether we could even
Not really, right?
snapshot it. We'd have to go back and actually look at addresses on certain tax documents as our only source, and I wouldn't count on that to be the most reliable.
That'd be a heavy lift.
Yeah, I'm not requesting it. I just think that it would be interesting to see the trending.
Is it moving
So-
farther? Yeah.
From healthcare claims, from being a partially self-funded plan, we do have some access to employees using the plan too, and some numbers there. And we share the information with other large employers too, and we're all seeing the trend of where you're having more and more employees live down Valley. So it was previously, I think, 60-40, and then it's slowly becoming 50-50, and where you have more and more staff, not just being pushed down Valley and moving further and further down Valley, but there is a trend there within the health claims for sure, and addresses.
Yeah, I'm sure. Ward?
Well, this kind of goes back to one of Bill's campaign issues. The free RAFTA service up and down the valley. Does the city of Aspen subsidize bus fares up and down?
City of Aspen full-time employees are eligible for a fare-free bus pass from the city that they can use for employment and for their own personal use as well. So that is an available benefit. We also, for those who maybe don't necessarily need a bus pass for every day, but occasional use, we provide subsidized single trip ticket essentially for them as well.
Thank you.
Any additional? All right, we'll keep going. All right, so I'm gonna walk you through this chart just because it's kind of a big chart. So all the way on the far left, we have what the AMI bracket is for that group of employees, what the AMI actually is, not just the percentage, and the number of full-time employees that make that income. And then we looked at it by employees that make that AMI, the percent of them that live in a subsidized housing. So the idea here is, I'm sorry, and I'm happy to explain it more if you need it while I'm engaging.
No, I'm getting it, I'm
Okay,
getting
good,
it.
and I'll let it absorb. Yeah, so, because the idea here is, are employees in subsidized housing making an income arrangements, or subsidized housing serving particular groups of income earners? And so all the way on the right, you can see it's fairly uniform, and that's for both city and APCHA housing. So it's not just our units, it's also APCHA's, and it does not include other types of subsidized housing, like we might have some employees in school district housing or hospital housing too. So we're just looking at that. So based on your income, or this employee's income, are they in subsidized housing or not? And in total, we have about 67% of our employees are not served by subsidized housing right now, and are in, so 232 are in free market options.
So obviously, you've heard a bit about where our employees live, how much they're earning on an hourly basis, and kind of the affordability aspect of housing. And you've heard a little bit about the housing program itself. Obviously, we want to wrap up tonight with talking about the stipend program, because that's still an item of question for the council. I did want to lead this off with the aspect that, you know, there are programs like this already out there. Obviously, the Glenwood Springs is running its own program currently. I think this is maybe their second year doing this. They don't have quite the same challenges that we do in terms of the affordability aspect for further up valley you go. So their program is perhaps a little bit less funded than what we're currently asking for in the pilot program. It also only serves 83 employees. The other aspect is Pickens County is running a different type of program. It's a shared equity program where they actually buy into the unit and hold a portion of the ownership interest. That is a more costly endeavor and basically only helps, again, one person at a time or one family at a time, versus a stipend program that really has broad-reaching aspects and benefits. But it is another option that, you know, the city could explore, or other employers as well, whoever wanted to do something like this. But essentially, people are getting a little bit more creative and trying to crack this nut, as Alyssa said, about how to solve the housing crisis generally. As a reminder, this program is funded basically through internal transfers from other city departments. We basically have a $10,000 head charge per full-time equivalent that gets transferred into this fund and basically gets banked over time to use on projects, such as in the past, acquiring more housing units. We have discussed with the council that we are looking at future developments for some affordable housing that we would like to partner up with other community partners and potentially buy into those, and maybe some of this fund balance would be used for those types of endeavors, but it also would be available really for this type of program as well without any change.
With that, does this have to be a housing stipend? It can't go into people's salaries?
So you could. I mean, it's a total compensation philosophy question.
And I would not recommend it.
Yeah.
What, keep in
Sorry,
mind,
I would
this
not
is-
recommend it.
This is a pilot program is what we're suggesting. So to evaluate the pilot program and moving the needle with increasing it or decreasing it, it's advised to be part of your benefits package, but once it's in a salary per se as a pilot program, you couldn't unravel that. And that way you can keep your salary competitive with what we call our market target, competitive to other employers too.
Understood on that. A couple comments would be pilot programs sometimes are a way of getting things, and it's really hard to get out of a pilot program. But it's easy to be like, oh, it's just to try it, and then you never get out of it because it's there already. And I got a bunch more comments, but on this one, is it a taxable benefit?
Yes, it would be taxable.
So it really is just a housing stipend separate from a salary. And then I guess one relevant for right now, and then I have more, is you cited Glenwood Springs. Do you know of any city of Aspen or anyone closer that has housing specific stipends? Or is Glenwood Springs really the closest you can cite as housing stipend?
We do. There's private employers that are doing this already and have been part of their compensation packages. So it's not new. I mean, particularly you go into the hospitality industry and you look at their management staff, that there are benefits like this included. I just want to go back, though, to your question before about why not just increase the salaries. If you do that, you have to do it for every employee. You cannot discriminate based upon what their current housing status may be, being deed restricted or free market. So I just want to make us aware, that's it, which means our cost estimates would not be appropriate right now for that. They would be underfunded for that type of, the reason being is when I pay a police officer, I can't choose, say, because you're in subsidized housing, you get $4 more an hour than the person, I'm sorry, $4 an hour less than the person who isn't. So
Same job.
It's the same job. They should be paid relatively closely for quality performance and not have their housing be a determinant in what their hourly rate is.
Yeah, I would say by that same argument, you're saying this is an unequitable benefit for some employees who do get it because they got lucky with housing or unlucky with housing. It's something that's hard to measure. I just think there's unintended consequences potentially on both sides of this, and that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, some other questions I would ask is like, what's to say a landlord doesn't just raise rents because they know it's a City of Aspen employee getting now a housing stipend? Oh, you're getting $300 more? I'll take $150 more in rent, or maybe the entire $300. Or like, what does it do to the economics of a housing market when you just like flush new cash into it? Or lastly, what does it do to other employers in the area that now have to compete against the City of Aspen for housing when us as a council are obviously wanting the city to function as highly as possible, but we're not just for the City of Aspen employees, we're for every employee in the valley because this is a community job. So I just think there are bigger issues than that housing stipends cause, and throwing money at things usually looks good on the surface, can lead to many unintended consequences. That's why I ask about the salary thing, and like that also has consequences, so I feel very stuck here, but I'm just saying I'm not sure if this housing stipend, albeit a pilot program, solves the issue at hand, rather than making people feel good for a second until their rents go up, because now there's just more supply of cash and the demand is the same.
Do we think it is legal to, do we think it is legal to discriminate on the housing stipend based on whether someone is in deed restricted housing or?
I think there's a distinction that's justified. Certainly we can use that, the word you used and what has been used here, but you can justify those distinctions with housing, and I think it's been successfully done in places around the country. Those recognize that housing situations, stipends are pretty common. I don't know, and I haven't done the research to see if anybody's challenged that. So I believe it's defensible. I can't.
A question of clarification. This pilot program would be people that are already in subsidized housing plus free market, or just free market?
So you may have led into this at least one of the bullets on this last slide, if I can answer your question. And none of the recommendations, but in order to provide some context to the council, we wanted to show kind of the ability to create a program that either is a flat rate, or you can make a graduated rate based on income. You can change your qualification for whether or not you would benefit from a benefit like this. Sorry. So I gave you a few different snapshots of how many people would be affected and what the average dollar amount would be if you kind of ran those types of programs. To your question, Ward, nobody would qualify for this benefit if they were in an existing price-controlled housing option, whether it was from the city or from some other entity. We would basically require an affidavit, probably at a minimum, just to make sure that that doesn't happen.
If I can go back one slide on the transfers in, just for the public and for all of us to understand that these 89% of the funding comes from transfers in, and those are from tax, that's from city coffers that are derived from tax revenues. So these, it's not, they don't materialize from nowhere. It's money that's the community's been taxed for already, and now it's transferred into an additional benefit for the 505 fund.
Yep, it'll be through taxes and fees through different government functions, and basically it's there to be aggregated to be able to create the housing program that would be needed to house the workers for those operations.
If I may, I wanted to go back to the legality question. I did run this through Employers Council. We're a member, so we receive employment law, legal assistance and advice too. And the employment law attorney that I spoke with did not see any issues with adding this if it were to be added as a benefit. We talked a lot about recruitment bonuses, sign-on bonuses, other types of bonuses and programs that comprise a total compensation package.
The last thing I'll just add on this last bullet is that, you know, this is not intended to be just the new program going forward. We still anticipate that there is a need to acquire additional units. We did notice that in the budget meetings about trying to partner into the lumberyard project as well as maybe the Forest Service site if and when that would come online. We want to make targeted acquisitions that are smart, that are kind of aggregated so they're easier to manage and kind of work through that program. Continue to still create some additional units to house those essential workers, those emergent workers, but yet still have some way to also treat some of the hardship that's being felt by the rest of the workforce that wouldn't otherwise qualify for some of those units.
No, I just think the intent is so good, but I really question what would happen if this was implemented in the way it's being suggested. I also think perspective-wise and philosophically how the public sector and the private sector rely on each other, and this just feels like a program to undercut the tax that the private sector is generating for the public sector to then, you know, have our employees housed and say, good luck, now we have all the tax money that you guys help produce, but you're not going to get that benefit in the same way. I think the one compromise that I can think of at this time, and one that I think is not new precedent setting, is doing a stipend, housing stipend program for new employees for a certain number of years, but not continuously and not in this way.
Yeah, I have a question on a few slides before this that actually weren't presented, but I feel what Sam is saying. Are we creating inequity with our taxpayer dollars? I think that we have a responsibility, just like a business owner does, and look after their employees, try to retain and try to attract employees, recruit, all of the things that this program is designed to do. The private sector does as well. This company does larger. I mean, the hospital has housing, the school district has housing, ski company has a lot of housing. So I'm just curious as how this meshes and compares to the stipends that are available through the large employers in the valley. It's an equity program question that Sam's is mentioning, and I mean, we already have a 505 program that is to the benefit of city employees over the 150 program. That, you know, people could go to APCHA or they can go to 505 if city employee. So they have an extra 74 units that are available to them as a city employee that aren't available to a private sector employee. So that's an overall philosophical question that I've been wrestling with for 8 years. But then I had a specific question, I think that's on page 53 of our packet, is that Burlingame, no stated priority rental or ownership. HOAs at Burlingame are for ownership only. Correct. So are you saying that there are rentals at Burlingame?
No, there are only ownership units at Burlingame.
Okay. Yeah, it just registers my concerns that echo, I think, what it's feeling.
Yes?
I have reservations about this, but I think the benefits outweigh it. I think staff comes to us with a proposal like this, it means we have an issue we need to think about. Ultimately, Aspen's a tourist destination, and High expectations are placed on the city to provide the services that the city provides, and if we don't have the employees to do that, we're not doing our job. So I think anything we can do to retain our city employees is important, and I would support that.
Thanks, John. Any comments at this time, Bill? Sam, you made a suggestion of supporting a stipend program, but only for new hires.
Sorry.
Is that your? I'm looking for other solutions. You work in this space on a day-to-day basis, so I'm looking for other solutions. Do you have any other ideas about moving something forward, or are you at a time, or do you just need more time to think about, other opportunities?
I just think housing stipends lead to unintended consequence anytime you try to solve the problem by just handing someone more money. However, I do think like a housing stipend for a new hire might be beneficial just because it can be really more difficult to get on your feet in a place like Aspen, but after you've been here for a number of years, it can be at least a little bit easier to try to find that special spot where you can stay. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying it's easier, so that's why I can see that level of compromise. The other thing with the housing here is just it's a competitive market, and the school district, the hospital, all these others, we just need more housing than the 74 that we have, but trying to influx cash into the free market is a really difficult thing to do and actually accomplish what you set out to do, in my mind.
At the school district, in your office, have you had this same conversation?
I have, and that's another thing is, it's only my personal thoughts on it, so I don't speak for the school district by any means. But I can imagine that this would be very difficult for the budget and everything that goes on there, and other employers especially, to try to compete with one of being the only entity that we know of that does specific housing stipends of a big public entity. So I can see it just going wrong, and I also would say, once again, the whole pilot program thing is, once you start giving people something like this, good luck taking it back.
Yeah. It's easy to start a war, but it's harder to stop.
Well, has thought been given to that if this were to be 1 year? And on one of the slides it said at the bottom that acquisitions are still going to be looked at. We have some opportunities coming up, maybe at Lumberyard and others that we'd be looking for. So it's potential that we could add to our portfolio of available units over the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. So have you thought about how we would transition away from this? If this was something that we were starting to make gains in other areas and adding units and having that availability for more staff than 74, do we see that kind of long plan with something like this? I know you've thought about it.
Can you predict to me the next real estate crash that makes the Mid and Lower Valley affordable for the salaries we're paying?
No.
That's what that question feels like.
No, but I can tell you when the next boom's coming, and it's pretty soon. It's not going down. All right.
Right, so for stability in workforce, we already have things that we provide when an employee is a new hire. I'm not worried about that. I don't need any direction from the council table from that. What I'm trying to do is keep staff here. I want to be really clear with you. It's about keeping staff here to avoid, I'll take the example of a planner. It can take us 6 months to fill a planner vacancy and then another year to train them to actually be able to work independently within our land use code because of how complicated it is. So there's 18 months in already for that new employee. It is much more desirable and a higher return for the community to keep that planner here.
I want to counter that, though, by then if a planner is so important as it is, we should be paying a higher salary. That is the whole thing of economics, free market economics. If someone is that valuable, we should be paying a higher salary versus trying to just do a housing stipend.
So that would require a position statement from the council that you're telling me to pay between 100 and 120 able to do that.
If that's where we get.
I'm thinking that's minimum. And then you're accepting as well that your intentions are to not house any more of the workforce within this area for the city of Aspen. The numbers of, the individuals may move, but the numbers won't move very much moving forward, because even with those wages, ownership is unattainable through SALT. The closest place, maybe a little bit in Algebel. But I just want to make sure we're really clear, we understand the long-term impacts of that is that there's been a long-held belief that the employees should be members of the community it serves, and the city should support that. And I think this is one of those steps that supports continuing that to happen.
Do you have another comment?
Well, yeah, I think it dovetails into both Sarah and Sam are saying is that if we have a housing stipend that's several $100s a month to an employee, how does that put that employee in the market? Are they now being paid more, 120% more, or are they being paid more than other people that have a similar position in other municipalities? And if we're going to do a housing stipend program, is it a more direct approach to increase salaries? But I think what Sarah said is you can't just target an employee based on where they live. So it's, I'm not sure where to go with this, but I can see that increase in a stipend. You're increasing the total compensation for that employee, and maybe you're putting them into a category that is competitive or higher for another municipality.
Could you go back to the slide, please, that has the AMI starting at under 60%? So we look at this and it's the question, do we help all 232? And that's a question we're struggling with even with this proposal internally. The panel in front of you, as staff knows, is that I'm not in favor of supporting every single person in free market on our staff. However, I do think that there is some AMI relationship about where that cutoff could be. Because if we have employees that our salaries to them are under $60,000 a year, and most of that workforce is not receiving any support, we're hopeful that they are in a household of more than one to be able to survive here in this valley. But we intentionally didn't go to family or household size in our qualification criteria, because then it's becoming a very administratively burdened program compared to a $600,000 price tag. So I would just encourage you to think about that a little bit more, is that there's a sector of our workforce that their roles will never meet the priority criteria for whether it's the 74 units we have now or someday if we get that up to 100. They're never going to qualify into those, and the wages with those jobs still need to be done. This can be full-time ICE attendants, for example. Some of our other roles that are in there are custodial support at the Wheeler and at our public-facing buildings. Things like that are essential for delivering our services and are getting harder and harder to fill. So I'll stop there, and thank you for your time tonight. We look forward to direction tomorrow.
Bill.
Thanks, everyone, for this presentation. I found it helpful to understand. I wish it had come before the budget presentation, so I didn't have the reaction that I had to that, but thanks nonetheless. I can understand what you're saying. I don't fundamentally have an issue with a housing stipend program, and I understand the reasoning behind it. I do question how effective this will be. I don't know that it will change your turnover rate. That's why I was so curious about those numbers, and that's ultimately what you're getting. $300 a month in your example of just doing it equitably amongst everybody or that might have been $200 a month actually, amongst everybody in free market housing. That's not the difference between somebody living in Carbondale and living in Aspen. That's a far cry from making up that delta. So to Sarah's point about it's been a long-standing goal to have most of our employees living in the community that they serve. I don't know that that's a reasonable expectation, and this certainly isn't going to get us there. I would say, again, I'm not fundamentally opposed to this. I'm not as concerned with Sam is about shifting the market dynamics entirely. I totally respect and appreciate the points about creating more competition for private sector employers, and employees, I suppose. I think my response would be, I would try this, but I'd like to find the 600,000 elsewhere. You know, it'd be easy to support this if we weren't adding so many FTEs this year. We're making the problem worse by adding more employees, not better. You know, I would welcome suggestions for what we could do to offset that cost to support this.
Just, Bill, if I could just comment on your comment, is that we've, as this table and at our goals, had goals to increase public service, the infrastructure, and all these things that we want from our government. It boiled down to needing more people to deliver more services or a higher quality of service. So,
But are you getting the results from those goals? Are you seeing those?
Well,
Is it translating? So we're adding all these people, but is it translating?
I don't
To
know.
me,
It
it's
takes it takes a long time to see any results from these kind of things. I don't know that we can expect the results in 9 months.
Well, it's been
A
more
year,
than 9
year and
months at this point.
whatever. Yeah.
I appreciate your comment. I'm just, I don't think that there's like a direct correlation to adding people and meeting our goals.
All right, any other questions for clarification? The last slide that we had up is everybody's favorite, which is questions. But as Sarah was saying, we revisit this again tomorrow in our budget talks. So if anybody has any other information they would like tonight, let's do that. If not, then we can reconvene tomorrow for our regularly scheduled meeting and take this on as a budget item.
Let's reconvene tomorrow.
Whoopee.
All right.
All right, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
And Sarah, tonight, a lot of great material, and I thought presentations. Jen, you've become such an expert in this EIS bridge construction thing that it's just impressive. To you guys, thank you for giving a great presentation on very complex, difficult information. So a really great meeting tonight. Thank you guys so much. Once again, we want to always thank Grassroots TV. We are back tomorrow night for our regularly scheduled meeting. That will be at 5 o'clock. So we encourage members of the, please come on in and share your comments with City Council. Join us here at City Hall at 5. Thank you.